everyone, Novels Wonderland here. Thank you all for the love and support you've shown me and the channel.
Naruto Path to Godhood. Chapter 434 to 449, 435, Return to the Village. 1,412 words. After several large-scale clashes in recent days, both Konoha and Sunagakure had entered a brief period of restraint. Neither side seemed eager to start another major confrontation immediately. At the same time, a large number of reinforcements had suddenly arrived at the village garrison. As a result, the small restaurants around the camp were filled with an endless stream of hungry shinobi. The owner of the small restaurant where Hayashi and Minato sat was incredibly busy. Despite the constant rush, his face remained full of joy. The amount of money he earned in a single day like this was equal to what he normally made in an entire month. Even with the overwhelming number of customers, the restaurant served food surprisingly quickly. Before long, the dishes Hayashi and Minato had ordered were placed on their table. After eating a few snacks, Hayashi wiped his mouth and looked at Minato. "Do you know why Jiraiya-sensei asked you to come with me to check the list of fallen shinobi?" Minato nodded, his expression turning serious. At first, he had assumed he was simply being asked to help. However, after listening to the elderly Jonin talk about the fallen for the entire afternoon, he began to understand the real reason. Death was always a heavy subject. Yet for shinobi who lived constantly on the battlefield, death gradually became something ordinary. It was almost as routine as eating or drinking. When Minato was still a genin, he had not felt this weight very deeply. But as he grew older, his strength increased, and the number of battles he fought grew as well. He had taken lives. He had witnessed the deaths of many others. Slowly, he had begun to feel numb. But the stories the old Jonin told had reminded him of something important. Those names were not just records written on a list. Each of them had their own life, their own story. To their families and loved ones, they were irreplaceable. Every single one of them mattered. Jiraiya-sensei wanted Minato to understand the true weight of a life while checking that list. Hayashi lifted his cup and let out a quiet sigh. Jiraiya-sensei really is a great teacher. One day he will become a truly great ninja. Minato nodded and raised his own cup. Although Jiraiya often appeared unreliable, the years he had spent traveling outside the village had clearly changed him. He had matured greatly compared to the past. Among the three Sannin of Konoha, the one who had grown the most was actually him, the former dead last. After a moment of silence, Minato spoke again. "Hayashi, do you remember the conversation we had when we left the Land of Rain?" Hayashi nodded slightly. At that time, the two of them had discussed the future and talked about whether true peace could ever exist in the shinobi world. So, Minato hesitated briefly before continuing. "Have you found a way to achieve peace?" "I have an idea," Hayashi replied calmly. "But it still needs to be verified." He glanced at Minato's eager expression, and then gestured lightly at their surroundings. "You are not expecting me to explain something like that in a place like this, are you?" Minato laughed awkwardly. "I guess I am just a little impatient." Hayashi smiled faintly. "After this war ends, I will tell you and Nawaki about my plan. But before that, there is something more important." His tone turned serious. "You need to master the Flying Thunder God technique as soon as possible. You have no idea how much that technique will improve your abilities." Minato nodded confidently. "I will. The next time we meet, I will definitely have mastered it." "Good." Hayashi smiled. He had been waiting a long time to see the birth of the shinobi, who would one day be known as the Yellow Flash. Minato suddenly remembered something. "By the way, do you want me to bring anything to Nawaki?" Hayashi thought for a moment before answering calmly. "Yes. Tell him not to die." At the end of Konoha Year 37, the shinobi team, led by Hayashi and Tsukumo, finally returned to the village. The journey back had taken some time. They were escorting a large number of wounded shinobi, so their pace could not be too fast. However, their return was welcomed with great enthusiasm. Civilians and shinobi alike lined the streets to greet them. Even the third Hokage personally stood at the entrance of the village to welcome the returning team. After completing a brief report to the third Hokage, Hayashi returned with Mikoto to the long-missed Uchiha clan compound. The specific arrangements for their next missions would be decided later by the third Hokage. For now, Hayashi simply instructed Mikoto to prepare lunch before leaving again. The atmosphere throughout the village felt tense and heavy, as if something important was approaching. Hayashi did not stay on the streets for long. Before long, he arrived at the Hokage office building. "Haha, Hayashi, you are here," the third Hokage said with a smile. "I thought Tsukumo would arrive first." "Tsukumo Dano probably just reached home," Hayashi replied. "After all, he has a wife and child waiting for him." "Yes, little Kakashi is truly a genius," the third Hokage said with a sigh. "He is only 4 years old, yet he is already skipping grades. His academic performance is excellent in every subject." Hayashi smiled faintly. "That is only natural. My disciple should be talented." The third Hokage laughed. "If Kakashi can truly reach your level in the future, I will be able to laugh even in my sleep." He tapped his pipe thoughtfully. The Second Shinobi World War had already produced a genius like Hayashi. If the Third Shinobi World War could produce another genius like Kakashi, then Konoha would remain strong for decades. The third Hokage lit his pipe before continuing. "Rest for a few days now that you have returned. Kushina misses you quite a bit. Once you are rested, you will return to the front lines. As for the memorial ceremony, we will hold it tomorrow afternoon." He paused before continuing. "The heroic spirits of those who died in battle must be remembered. But the heroes who survived must also be valued. The living are always more precious than the dead." Hayashi nodded. "I understand. I will trouble you to inform Tsukumo as well. Also remember to attend the Jonin meeting the morning after tomorrow." "Understood. Then I will take my leave." The third Hokage lowered his head again and continued reviewing the documents on his desk while slowly smoking his pipe. After leaving the Hokage office building, Hayashi soon encountered the person he had expected to see. Kushina. The last time Hayashi had returned briefly from Ryuchi Cave, he had not even had time to rest. He had immediately led his team back to the battlefield with Jiraiya. At that time, he had only managed to greet Kushina quickly before leaving again. 2 days earlier, Kushina had learned that a group of shinobi led by Hayashi and Tsukumo would be temporarily returning from the battlefield. Since then, she had been waiting. When Hayashi walked out of the Hokage office building, she had already been standing nearby for quite some time. The two of them stood quietly for a moment. Kushina clearly had many things she wanted to say, yet after finally seeing him again, she found herself unusually quiet. Inside her body, the Nine Tails watched the scene with great interest and kept urging her impatiently, but Kushina completely ignored it. "I'm back, Kushina," Hayashi said gently. "Welcome back." Kushina blinked before walking forward. Her cheeks turned slightly red as she wrapped her arms around Hayashi's arm. She did not ask where he would be going next. Instead, she simply walked beside him in silence. Hayashi thought for a moment before speaking. "Let's go to the Uchiha compound first. Mikoto is cooking. It has been a long time since the three of us spent time together properly." He paused briefly. "After that, we can walk around the village. We will be staying here for the next 2 days anyway." Kushina nodded. "Okay." However, inside her mind she was thinking about something entirely different. At the end of this year, she would turn 18. That meant she would finally be an adult. And adults were allowed to do certain things. Chapter 435, 436, Orders. 1709 words. As was customary, the Jonin meeting was held inside the Hokage office building. Those present included clan heads who had remained in the village instead of going to the battlefield, ninja like Hayashi who had recently withdrawn from one front, and were about to be reassigned to another, and Jonin who had already rotated back to Konoha for rest. When Hayashi arrived that morning, it was almost 8 o'clock. Mikoto and Kushina were not with him. The reason was simple. The three of them had stayed up far too late the previous night. To be precise, they had spent more than half the night playing Fight the Landlord. As a result, both girls were still asleep early in the morning, leaving Hayashi to attend the meeting alone. Tsukumo had arrived very early. By the time Hayashi stepped into the hall, Tsukumo had already been waiting for quite some time. Gradually, the remaining Jonin in Konoha began to arrive one after another until the room slowly filled. Seeing that everyone had gathered, the third Hokage finally spoke. "Very well. Let the Jonin meeting begin." His voice was calm but firm. "The memorial ceremony at the Konoha Memorial Stone has already passed. Those we lost will remain in our hearts." He paused briefly, looking around the room. But Konoha's new sparks must continue to be passed on. This time, nearly 80 new students have graduated from the Ninja Academy. Taking advantage of the current pause in the war, I plan to deploy them to the battlefield. Many people in the room immediately understood the implication. The graduation season for the Ninja Academy had long passed, so the appearance of these new graduates could only mean one thing. They had been pushed through early because of the war. Calling them cannon fodder would not be an exaggeration. They were simply unfortunate enough to graduate during such a dangerous time. Before Hayashi's own graduation years ago, the village had deliberately arranged for experienced Jonin to take the students on missions, so they could gradually adapt to combat and killing. This group, however, would not receive that luxury. They would step onto the battlefield immediately after graduation, and the first blood they witnessed would likely be from enemy ninja. Even if their abilities were acceptable, many of them would struggle mentally when faced with real combat. On the other hand, ninja from a younger generation, such as Obito and Guy, would most likely miss this war entirely. Compared to the original timeline, the conflict had begun 4 or 5 years earlier. At this point, Obito's group had only been studying at the academy for a little more than a year. Of course, Kakashi was a different story. With his extraordinary talent, he would almost certainly complete the tasks Hayashi had given him, and graduate ahead of schedule. The third Hokage continued. At present, the village does not have enough Jonin available to serve as mentors. Therefore, some of these graduates will be temporarily assigned to Chunin squads. However, I have explained the responsibilities of a Jonin mentor many times before. You should all be familiar with them. The list of genin will be distributed after the meeting. Hayashi remained silent while listening to the Hokage's arrangements. Given the responsibilities he was about to undertake, it was impossible for him to act as a mentor at the moment. The meeting moved forward efficiently. Because Konoha itself was far from the front lines, the third Hokage did not discuss detailed battlefield tactics. That was the responsibility of the commanders stationed at each front. His duty was to look at the war from a broader perspective and allocate manpower and resources where they were needed most. The front in the Land of Wind was progressing well. Konoha had won several battles recently and had even captured the one-tailed Jinchuriki. Among all battlefields, it was currently the one with the most significant achievements. However, the situation in the Land of Hot Springs was far less favorable. That front was mainly fighting against Kumogakure. Danzo served as the commander there and had a mixed force under his leadership consisting of clan ninja and civilians alike. Unfortunately, Kumogakure had deployed 2 Jinchuriki. The 8 Tails Jinchuriki, Killer Bee, was still young, but had already demonstrated exceptional talent in controlling his tailed beast. The 2 Tails Jinchuriki, meanwhile, belonged to the same generation as the previous 8 Tails host, and was currently in the peak of her strength. Although the third Hokage praised Danzo for managing to hold off the third Raikage's son, and the 8 Tails Jinchuriki by himself, the truth remained that he had been injured and the front line had suffered defeat. That reality could not be concealed. Danzo was undoubtedly a capable comrade. When it came to conspiracies, intelligence gathering, and underground operations, he was extremely skilled. But wars were not won through schemes alone. In the end, strength remained the decisive factor. Facing young monsters on the battlefield, Danzo was clearly beginning to fall behind. Hayashi was not certain when Danzo first developed his obsession with the power of the Sharingan or other forbidden abilities, but one thing was clear. His desire for power was steadily reaching its peak. This could easily be seen through his increasingly frequent contact with Orochimaru. Naturally, the third Hokage could not ignore the worsening situation in the land of hot springs, especially since his longtime comrade was fighting there. After taking a sip of tea, he raised his hand and spoke decisively. "Hamura, I am assigning 2,000 ninja to you. You will support Danzo and stabilize the situation in the land of hot springs." Hamura Mitokado nodded calmly. Understood. As one of Konoha's senior advisors, he had no choice but to step forward at a moment like this. Still, after living a comfortable life in the village for more than 10 years, no one could say for certain how much of his former strength remained. Once the Kyomogakure front had been addressed, attention shifted to another battlefield. The Hidden Mist. The third Hokage continued. Under Tsunade's command, the Hidden Mist base in the Land of Bears has been destroyed. As a result, the enemy has pulled back and reinforced their defensive line. They are now concentrating their forces in the Land of Hot Springs and the Land of Waves. The enemy has recently begun mobilizing troops again, which suggests that reinforcements may soon arrive. He paused briefly before continuing. However, Tsunade has been reassigned to the Land of Wind. So for the Mist Front. His gaze moved across the room. I appoint Tsukumo Hatake as Supreme Commander of the base. A slight pause followed. And Uchiha Hayashi. Before the room could fully react to the announcement, the Hokage continued speaking. Additionally, for this campaign against the Hidden Mist, we will send a number of sensor ninja along with the troops already deployed at the front. The meeting then moved on to further discussions regarding supply distribution and troop movements across other battle zones. Eventually, the Jonin meeting came to an end. However, the third Hokage asked Tsukumo and Hayashi to remain behind. Some matters were too sensitive to discuss publicly. Even if there were no spies present, it was still inappropriate to speak about certain things in a large gathering. The Hokage handed them several documents. This is the detailed personnel configuration list. I am leaving it to the two of you. I have also arranged for additional Hyuga clan ninja to accompany your forces to the front line. He then produced another list. Regarding supplies, the daimyo of the Land of Fire has recently provided another shipment. For the time being, there will be no shortage of food or weapons. Here is the inventory. The supplies will depart together with your troops in 1 week. Understood. Hayashi accepted the list while Tsukumo carefully examined the intelligence files concerning the ninja assigned to their forces. The third Hokage looked at Hayashi with a serious expression. Konoha expects victory from you. But if mistakes occur, the village will not condemn you excessively. Hayashi, this is your first time carrying such responsibility. Both the village and I have very high expectations for you. Hayashi nodded firmly. I will do my best. Good. The Hokage smiled slightly. Then I will leave the Hidden Mist front to you. Do not disappoint me. After leaving the Hokage office building, Tsukumo suddenly chuckled. When the Second Great Ninja War first began, the third Hokage said almost the same thing to me. Hayashi looked at him curiously. So what did you say back then, big brother Tsukumo? Tsukumo lowered his head as if recalling the memory. After a moment, he lifted his face, completely expressionless, and quietly said, "Oh." Hayashi blinked. That was it. What else was I supposed to say? Tsukumo replied casually. Should I have promised to defeat a legendary opponent or something dramatic like that? Hayashi gave him a thumbs up. Very steady. Tsukumo laughed. Forget that. Tomorrow we will go inspect the prepared supplies. As for Tsunade, he glanced at Hayashi. You will need to speak with her. Hayashi nodded. Leave Tsunade-sensei to me. As the commander currently stationed at the front, Tsunade was undoubtedly the person who understood the hidden miss situation best. Although Hayashi could gather information after arriving at the battlefield, it would be far better to familiarize himself with the situation beforehand. When they reached a fork in the road, Tsukumo patted Hayashi on the shoulder. Kakashi is your student. As his teacher, you cannot spend the next 2 days constantly wandering around with Mikoto and Kushina. I know. Hayashi rolled his eyes slightly before lowering his voice. What about you? As his father, you cannot keep pushing your son onto me while you spend every day with Sister Axiu. Tsukumo laughed heartily. I still want a daughter. After saying that, he patted Hayashi's shoulder once more, and began walking toward the Hitaki clan compound. Hayashi simply shook his head with a helpless smile. ____. Support the story by sending Power Stones to unlock bonus chapters. == If you want to read more, there are up to 100 chapters available on Patreon. Patreon.com/Zeph. Chapter 436, 437, The Princess of the Casino. 1566 words. The third Hokage had 3 famous disciples. The first was Jiraiya. He had signed a summoning contract with the Toads of Mount Myaboku, and his mastery of the summoning jutsu and various elemental ninjutsu made him one of the strongest jonin in Konoha. When he was not training or traveling, Jiraiya often wandered through the red light districts. It was said that he knew the layout of Konoha's hot springs better than he knew the inside of his own house. Another disciple was Orochimaru. Orochimaru was widely regarded as a rare scientific genius. Even the third Hokage himself could not easily surpass Orochimaru's research into forbidden techniques. Orochimaru was obsessed with studying the human body, and he often established underground laboratories even inside temporary battlefield camps. The final disciple was Tsunade. Tsunade Hime, the granddaughter of the first Hokage, was famous throughout the ninja world. She possessed unmatched medical ninjutsu, and even ninja from other villages addressed her respectfully as Lady Tsunade. However, her most common destination was not the hospital. It was the underground casinos scattered around Konoha. She was notorious for losing nearly every bet she made. Because of that, gamblers often joked that she was all chest and no brains. The casinos themselves loved seeing her walk through the door, since she was practically guaranteed profit. But after losing 30 million ryo in only 3 days, even the third Hokage might hesitate before admitting she was his disciple. Will Konoha abandon its only aging princess over 30 million in gambling debt? Who is the real winner? Standing outside an underground casino somewhere in Konoha, Hayashi glanced at a cheaply printed tabloid and casually tossed it into a nearby trash bin. Then he stepped inside. The smell hit him immediately. The interior still maintained the appearance of traditional Japanese architecture, complete with sliding doors and tatami floors, but the air was thick with tobacco smoke and stale breath. For a ninja with sharp senses, the environment was especially unpleasant. Ha ha ha. I won. After searching through several rooms without finding the person he wanted, Hayashi suddenly heard a loud and unmistakable voice echoing from the next room. It was Tsunade. Curious, he slid open the door and quietly entered. Without attracting attention, he took a seat at the edge of the gambling table. Damn it, I knew my luck couldn't stay this good forever, Tsunade muttered. Even so, she pretended not to notice Hayashi's arrival. Come on, hurry up and pay, she shouted loudly. Tsunade stood up without the slightest hint of elegance, stretching her hand toward the gamblers around her as she demanded her winnings. Did the fat sheep finally get lucky today? One gambler whispered quietly. Despite the comment, everyone obediently pushed their chips toward her. "Stop talking nonsense." Tsunade snorted proudly. "Before, I was just taking it easy on you. If I get serious, I wouldn't even be afraid if the Sage of Six Paths himself showed up. Now hurry up and deal the next round." Hayashi fell silent. He wondered how the Sage of Six Paths would react if he could hear a descendant speaking like this. More importantly, Hayashi suddenly felt like leaving. Hadn't people always said Tsunade gambled only to cope with painful memories of the first Hokage, and to hide her fragile emotions? From Hayashi's perspective, however, she looked exactly like a veteran gambler enjoying herself. The image of a goddess had completely collapsed. At that moment, the wooden door slid open again. "Lady Tsunade, I brought lunch." A small girl walked inside carrying several lunch boxes. She looked only 4 or 5 years old. "Oh Shizen, just leave it there," Tsunade replied casually without even turning around. "Wait until I finish this round." Then she returned her full attention to the gambling table. If she kept winning today, maybe she could pay off part of her 30 million debt. "So this is Shizen." Hayashi observed the black-haired girl with interest. He wondered why such a young child was here in a place like this. For a moment, an absurd thought crossed his mind. Could this be kidnapping? Shizen noticed the strange man staring at her. Although he looked handsome, he was clearly older than her. Anyone sitting inside a casino could not possibly be a good person, except for Lady Tsunade, of course. The little girl raised her fist and glared at him with all the fierceness she could muster. Seeing her childish expression, Hayashi could not help laughing quietly. Of course, if he had known she secretly thought he looked a bit old, he probably would not have laughed so happily. Hayashi glanced around the room. Then he snapped his fingers softly. In the next moment, the little girl who had been standing there swayed slightly before collapsing gently onto the tatami floor. She had fallen asleep. Hayashi calmly removed a cloak from a storage scroll and placed it over Shizen to keep her warm. Afterward, he walked to the window and pushed it open, allowing fresh air to enter the room. The smoky atmosphere began to clear slightly. Tsunade glanced at him from the corner of her eye and let out a dissatisfied grunt, but she did not stop him. Soon the cold winter air began flowing into the room. For ninja like Hayashi and Tsunade, the temperature was nothing. The gamblers, however, were ordinary civilians. One man quickly stood up, shivering as he walked toward the window. He reached it, hesitated for a moment, then quietly turned around and returned to his seat. "Why didn't you close it?" another gambler complained while walking over himself. Meanwhile, Hayashi had already opened the lunchbox Shizen brought for Tsunade. Tsunade looked sideways at him. The veins on her forehead twitched slightly. "Haha," Hayashi laughed casually, completely ignoring her expression. "Eh? Why won't this window close?" the gambler said with confusion. No matter how hard he tried, the window refused to move. Eventually he gave up and walked back. Even though a heater burned in the room, the open window allowed freezing air to pour inside. The temperature soon dropped drastically. The gamblers were wearing thin jackets at most. The cold wind quickly became unbearable. "This room might be haunted," someone muttered nervously. One by one, the gamblers began losing their patience. After shivering through another round and losing more money to Tsunade, they all stood up and declared they were done playing. Tsunade tried to stop them several times, but none of them stayed. Soon the entire room was empty. Only Tsunade, Hayashi, and the sleeping Shizen remained. "Are you enjoying this?" Tsunade finally stood up and walked to the window. She easily closed it, something the gamblers had been unable to do earlier. Then she returned to the low table and sat down. Even though ninja had strong resistance to heat and cold, sitting in the winter wind for half an hour was still unpleasant. "Tsunade-sensei is making money comfortably," Hayashi said while eating from the lunch box. "Compared to ninja like us who run across battlefields all year, your life looks quite relaxing. You brat, well, I guess I can't really call you a brat anymore, Tsunade said while glancing at him. She suddenly realized he was now a head taller than her. I just came back from the battlefield recently, she continued. Is it too much to ask for a little personal time? Of course not, Hayashi replied. But sensei, isn't this child labor? He looked toward Shizune, who was still sleeping peacefully. Good thing Konoha doesn't enforce strict laws about that, otherwise you might be facing a long prison sentence. Nonsense, Tsunade snorted. She held a lunchbox in one hand and chopsticks in the other, eating without the slightest grace expected of a legendary beauty. She is my new disciple. A disciple helping her teacher is perfectly normal. Hayashi raised an eyebrow. When did you take another disciple? Tsunade paused slightly before answering. It wasn't exactly planned. Her father was my classmate. He died during a mission in the Land of Water, and I couldn't save him. Before he died, he asked me to take care of Shizune. I see, Hayashi nodded slowly. The story itself was touching. Still, he could not help feeling that Shizune had just entered a tiger's den. Bringing a 4-year-old child to a casino. If Shizune's father knew about this, he would probably crawl out of his grave in anger. Tsunade suddenly narrowed her eyes. Strange, she said slowly. Why do I feel like you're secretly insulting me in your head? Hayashi quickly wiped imaginary sweat from his forehead. Haha, sensei, how could I possibly do that? Then he forced a smile. Other people might misunderstand you, but I know the truth. Oh? Tsunade raised an eyebrow. You are clearly following the first Hokage's teaching philosophy. Hard experiences shaped strong ninja. Hayashi nodded seriously. Under your guidance, Shizune will definitely become an outstanding kunoichi. Tsunade finally smiled with satisfaction. That's more like it. Then she looked at him with sudden interest. Since you respect my teaching methods so much, how about this? In the future, let me train your daughter. I will pass down all my abilities. Hayashi froze. All his life's savings disappearing in a single night suddenly flashed through his mind. Tsunade truly was a terrifying person. Carrot underscore 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 carrot. Send power stones. Chapter 437, 438, A Quiet Farewell. 1,382 words. The casino had grown quiet. Almost no one remained inside, and the lively noise from earlier had faded into silence. The two of them sat across from each other, calmly finishing their boxed lunches. After a while, Tsunade wiped the corner of her mouth with the back of her hand. She stood up, stretched slightly, and spoke in a relaxed tone. Let's go somewhere more comfortable. Hayashi raised his eyebrows in exaggerated surprise. For you, Tsunade-sensei, isn't the casino the most comfortable place on earth? Tsunade shot him a flat look, pushed open the door, and walked out without answering. Hey, at least take the kid who's asleep. You knocked her out, you carry her. Her voice drifted back from the street outside. Hearing her footsteps gradually fade away, Hayashi could only sigh. He took off his coat, and gently draped it over the small girl sleeping beside him. Then he carefully lifted the unconscious Shizune onto his back before hurrying after Tsunade. The strange sight of a young ninja carrying a sleeping child through the street drew plenty of curious glances from passers-by. Eventually they arrived at their next stop. Hayashi looked around the small izakaya, then watched Tsunade fill his sake cup all the way to the brim. He sighed helplessly. So we ended up in a bar after all. Don't worry about the details. Tsunade ignored his complaint and asked quietly. How are things in the Land of Wind? Hayashi's expression became more serious. Casualties are within acceptable limits. Aside from those who died immediately on the battlefield, most of the injured received treatment. He paused briefly before continuing. A few severely wounded ninja had to undergo amputations, but their lives were saved. Tsunade remained silent and waited. Hayashi understood the information she truly wanted. However, the Hidden Sand Village currently has almost twice the number of troops that Konoha has deployed. Chiyo and her elite forces have already entered the battlefield. He took a sip of sake before finishing. We still hold the advantage for now, but the overall situation isn't optimistic. Tsunade frowned slightly. Chiyo, that old woman, is still beyond Kana's ability to deal with. She lifted her cup and drank. The situation in the Hidden Mist Village isn't much better either. Her fingers tightened slightly around the cup as she let out a quiet sigh. Hayashi, do you think the medical ninja system I proposed back then is actually working? Hayashi answered without hesitation. Of course it is. Battlefield mortality has dropped significantly. If it wasn't effective, the other villages wouldn't be trying to imitate it. Tsunade stared into the sake inside her cup. But you and I both know that it's only a temporary solution. As long as war exists, even the best medical ninja can't stop people from dying. She gave a self-mocking smile. Not even me. She swirled the cup gently and drank the rest of the sake in a single motion. Take this little one's father, for example. She tilted her chin slightly toward Shizune, who was still asleep nearby. If it wasn't for the war, someone with his strength might never have died. Her voice became quieter. In fact, if I had arrived at the Land of Bears battlefield just a little earlier, he might still be alive. Silence filled the small bar for a moment. Then Tsunade shook her head. But if doesn't mean anything. Dead is dead. The words were spoken lightly, almost casually. Hayashi looked at the woman in front of him. Her face looked as youthful as an 18-year-old girl, yet the emotion hidden in her eyes carried the weight of countless years. For a moment, Hayashi felt a sudden sense of familiarity. 10 years ago, in a quiet courtyard somewhere, he had seen another woman with the same youthful face, and the same sorrowful gaze as she drank sake alone. He quickly pushed the memory aside and sighed softly. Life always includes partings. Even the longest feast must eventually end. Tsunade shook her head. No need to comfort me. I've seen more people die than you've had meals in your life. When someone dies, someone else grieves. I'm far from the most miserable person in the world. She looked at him carefully. Besides, someone in your position should have already noticed Konoha's darker side by now. Hayashi nodded calmly. He didn't pretend to misunderstand the meaning behind her words. Yes. Tsunade watched his reaction closely. So what will you do now that you've seen how ugly things can get here? Her tone was completely serious. There was no hint of teasing. Years ago, she herself had left the village after gradually discovering those same truths. Hayashi thought for a moment before answering. Konoha is the place where I grew up. I may not feel obligated to protect it at all costs, but I won't leave it easily. My closest friends are all here. He paused slightly. Since the village has so many problems, why can't I be the one to change it? Tsunade raised an eyebrow. You want to become Hokage too? She refilled her cup slowly. Surprisingly, there was no mockery in her tone despite the fact that he was an Uchiha. She simply shook her head and sighed. Anyone who wants to become Hokage is a fool. My grandfather was a fool. My grand-uncle was a fool. Nawaki was a fool. And now you. She took another drink. A whole group of fools. Hayashi only smiled quietly and didn't argue. Seeing that expression on his face made Tsunade snort coldly. She pushed her nearly empty sake cup toward him. Drink. If you die on the battlefield, at least you won't be able to complain that you never tasted sake. Hayashi looked resigned but still picked up the cup and drank it in one go. In a war that dragged on endlessly, no one could guarantee survival. Even someone as powerful as Tsukumo had spoken to Hayashi recently in a tone that sounded almost like a final farewell. After watching him finish the drink, Tsunade spoke again. I really don't want to return to the battlefield. Her voice softened slightly. But Konoha is the treasure my grandfather built with his own hands. He fought his entire life for it. My grand-uncle died protecting it. The Senju clan sacrificed everything for this village. She stood up slowly. So I have to go. Her eyes turned toward him. Now that you're back, it's time for me to head to the land of wind. She pulled out a scroll from her pocket and tossed it to him. Everything you need to know is recorded inside. The situation on the front line is written in detail. Once you arrive, ask Nara Shikaku for the rest. Hayashi nodded. Nara Shikaku. Having the Nara clan leader present on the battlefield would make many things easier. Tsunade nodded once. That's right. She stretched lazily. Oh, and say goodbye to Kushina for me. Then she glanced at him again. Hayashi. Don't you dare die. Hayashi smiled lightly. I won't. I still want to see my beautiful Tsunade-sensei remain 18 forever, even though you're already an old. He never finished the sentence. A punch slammed into him and sent him crashing to the floor. Tsunade bent down and flicked his forehead. How many times have I told you? Never mention a woman's age. You want to die? She snorted coldly. Completely unconcerned about the view from her slightly open collar. Then she straightened up, lifted the now awake but still confused Shizen onto her back, and walked out of the bar without looking back. It was a surprisingly pleasant farewell. After this moment, the next time they met might be when the war had finally ended. Just as Tsunade reached the door, Shizen turned around while sitting on her back. She made a playful face at the ninja still lying on the floor. Big brother, I know you've been staring at me. You're handsome, but you're way too old. I like younger boys. So sorry, you're not my type. Don't wait for me. Hayashi sat on the floor in complete silence. Konoha's lightning flash had just been pierced through the heart by 10,000 arrows. Chapter 438, 439, An Unusual Welcome Back Dinner. 1,304 words. The commercial district of Konoha was still lively despite the cold winter evening. Outside a small shop, Hayashi stood motionless while staring at the large signboard above the entrance. His expression looked exactly like someone who had just seen something completely unreasonable. For a moment, he genuinely struggled to find words that could describe how he felt. So as my welcome back dinner. Abito whispered quickly from beside him. Hayashi slowly turned his head. Right. A welcome back dinner. He looked at the shop sign again before continuing. You are 5 days late, and the best idea you came up with is treating me to ice cream. He crossed his arms and glanced at the group behind him. In the middle of winter, when the air is freezing, you want me to eat ice cream. Are you trying to be funny? Big brother Hayashi, it is not about the gift itself. It is the thought that counts. Standing behind him, Asuma Sarutobi spoke with the tone of someone sharing an important life lesson. Hayashi looked at him from the corner of his eye. Without saying anything, he calmly reached into his pouch and pulled out a kunai. He held it out toward Asuma. Here. A graduation gift that I prepared early for you. A genin-level weapon. He rotated the blade slightly. The metal looked chipped and worn, and faint stains of dried blood were still visible. Remember, it is the thought that counts. Asuma forced out an awkward laugh while quietly stepping back. Could he really accept a gift like this? Absolutely not. Back when they were still at the Ninja Academy, this same man had once casually given someone an extremely rare weapon material rumored to be from the Hidden Mist Village's famous blade techniques. Compared to that, this battered kunai looked like trash. Even if the dried blood on it belonged to someone powerful, it was still junk. And you, guy? Hayashi turned his attention to the boy currently doing push-ups on the ground nearby. How should one even describe this kid? A bowl haircut. A bright green training suit that had been popular in Konoha decades ago. And a pair of extremely thick eyebrows above wide, energetic eyes. Guy pushed himself off the ground, jumped to his feet, and gave a brilliant smile that almost sparkled. Only by eating ice cream during winter can we truly demonstrate the burning passion of youth. Hayashi stared at his extremely sincere face for a moment before rubbing his forehead. Right. A beast was always going to behave like a beast. And what about you, Kakashi? Kakashi, who had recently started wearing a mask over the lower half of his face, tilted his head slightly. I think salty ice cream tastes good. Hayashi froze. Salty ice cream. The real question now was whether a devoted sweet lover like him should permanently remove such a heretic from his social circle. Slowly, Hayashi turned to look at the final person responsible. Obito. The goggle-wearing boy honestly raised his wallet and pointed to a red coupon inside. It expires this month if I do not use it. The light slowly disappeared from Hayashi's eyes. He felt completely defeated. Forget it. I will treat all of you to ramen instead. He sighed and casually reached over, removing every single coupon from Obito's wallet before placing them into his own pocket. Obito's face instantly turned the color of an eggplant. Those coupons had taken serious effort to collect. He had helped countless grandmothers cross the street to earn them. Without those coupons, his pocket money would barely be enough to buy snacks. And without snacks, how was he supposed to get closer to Rin? This was not just a financial disaster. It was sabotage against his love life. Is something wrong, Obito? Hayashi looked at him with complete innocence. If you are feeling sick, you can go home early. No need to force yourself. I can take the others with me. He added casually. You would not want Kyoko waiting too long. No. I feel great. Obito forced a stiff smile. If he followed along, maybe he could still salvage something. If he left now, everything would be lost. Asking for the coupons back was impossible. Obito still had a reputation to maintain at the academy. Losing face in front of everyone was not an option. Under the cold winter sky, the group finally began walking toward their destination. Ichiraku Ramen. The most famous ramen shop in Konoha. Its reputation was legendary throughout the village. It was said that the shop sold nearly 300,000 bowls of ramen every year. If all those bowls were placed in a single line, they could circle the entire village. The ramen here is great, but it feels too cheap. Obito muttered while standing in line. He had sacrificed an entire stack of coupons earlier. He wanted something that would at least hurt Hayashi's wallet a little. Behind him, Asuma actually nodded in agreement. Guy looked extremely excited, as if he had not eaten anything for several days. Kakashi looked slightly conflicted. Part of him wanted to show respect to his sensei, while the other part wanted to maintain his usual cool and distant image. Hayashi simply watched them quietly. The truth was that they had not gathered to welcome him back. He was leaving for the battlefield soon. This so-called welcome dinner was actually a farewell gathering. Each of them had their own reasons for being here. Obito had recently heard new stories about Konoha's famous lightning flash, and wanted to stay close to such a powerful figure. Asuma had come because of instructions from his father. He hoped that getting closer to Hayashi might lead to another valuable gift someday. Kakashi was Hayashi's disciple, so seeing his teacher off was part of his responsibility. As for Guy, his father Dai had known Hayashi for years. Because of that connection, Guy had also spent a lot of time around him while growing up. In a way, he was half a disciple as well. Hey, Hayashi, what are you doing here? After they finally stepped inside the shop, a familiar voice suddenly called out from a nearby table. In the corner of the ramen shop, Kushina and Mikoto were sitting together. They waved toward him. The four boys standing behind Hayashi immediately froze. Their expressions changed instantly. Obito's eyes widened. Why is Kushina-sensei here? He silently looked toward the others. Asuma swallowed nervously while already thinking about possible escape routes. Kakashi quickly adjusted his mask, trying to hide more of his face. Guy rubbed his arms instinctively, remembering the extremely intense training sessions he had experienced before. Do not just stand there. Kushina's voice suddenly rose several levels. Come over here. The famous red-hot habanero of Konoha had spoken. With just one loud command, the four boys obediently walked forward like prisoners heading toward their punishment. I thought they were treating you. Mikoto looked at Hayashi curiously. Why are you here instead? Well, we originally planned to eat yakiniku, but the restaurant was completely full. Obito quickly interrupted with a bright smile. Really? Kushina narrowed her eyes while scanning the four boys suspiciously. Hayashi lightly patted Obito's shoulder. Leave them alone, Kushina. Kushina was now working as a teacher at the Ninja Academy, and these kids were part of her class. They were completely terrified of this beautiful but extremely strict woman. Kushina smiled slightly. Her expression looked strangely similar to a fox that had just caught its prey. Your intimidation is even worse than mine, Hayashi-sensei. Hayashi laughed as he sat down. Kushina raised her chin proudly. Of course. _____. Unreleased chapters are available on my Patreon. Look up _Zeph. Chapter 439, 440, Departure Toward the Mist bonus. 1,252 words. After spending several days idling around the village, Hayashi and Tsukumo Hatake, the supreme commanders assigned to the land of waterfront, still had not left Konohagakure. However, the two had already entered a state of intense preparation for war. Personnel adjustments, supply coordination, and numerous small but important details demanded their full attention. Because of this, Hayashi no longer had time to watch over the four children. Kakashi's training was immediately put on hold. The boy was clearly reluctant to see it end, but the moment Hayashi handed him the endless blade, Kakashi's disappointment quickly turned into excitement. The next time you return to Konoha, I will definitely surprise you, Kakashi said seriously as he hugged the sword. Watching his teacher walk away, Kakashi quietly turned to Kushina and asked, Teacher, are you and teacher lovers? Although he used the word teacher twice, Kushina immediately understood what he meant. She coughed lightly, and a faint blush spread across her face. Who told you that? I guessed. You brat. Kushina tried to grab Kakashi's ear, but he had already dashed away. Not far from the Konoha Ninja Academy, Tsukumo and Hayashi walked side by side toward the Hokage office. Aren't you going to say goodbye to Kakashi, elder brother Tsukumo? Hayashi asked. We will meet again in the future, so there is no need for unnecessary farewells, Tsukumo replied calmly. It is enough that you already said goodbye to him. Having only been a father for a few years and spending most of his time on the battlefield, Tsukumo was still searching for his place as a capable father. Hayashi smiled quietly. Walking along the peaceful streets of Konoha beside Tsukumo, he realized that the next time he returned to the village might not be for years. That night, only Hayashi, Tsukumo, and the Hiruzen Sarutobi were present in the Hokage office. The situation is roughly as follows, Hiruzen said slowly. The supplies provided by the fire daimyo are currently stored at the daimyo's residence. You can collect them when you pass through. He paused before continuing. In addition, I am entrusting 1,000 ninja to the two of you. Hiruzen looked at them seriously. Therefore, deploy the troops. I hope you will bring good news back to the village. Yes, Tsukumo and Hayashi replied at the same time. Before leaving the front lines, Tsunade had launched a large-scale assault against the forces of Kirigakure, destroying an outpost they had established in the Land of Bears. Thanks to that attack, the conflict between Konoha and the Hidden Mist had temporarily fallen into a stalemate. Because of this, Tsunade was able to withdraw with confidence, and Tsukumo and Hayashi could delay their departure slightly before heading to take command. Of course, the delay could not last long. The current coordinator on the front lines was Shikaku Nara. Although he possessed exceptional intelligence and strategic experience, he lacked the prestige and strength necessary to firmly command powerful clans such as the Uchiha clan and the Hyuga clan star. Early the next morning, a large number of ninja had already gathered at Konoha's main gate. Tsukumo and Hayashi arrived even earlier. Watching the steadily assembling shinobi, Hayashi remained calm on the surface. However, the sudden weight of responsibility on his shoulders brought undeniable pressure. Things were different now. In the past, he had only been responsible for a few teammates within a small squad. Now he carried the lives of 1,000 ninja. That should be everyone, Tsukumo said quietly. He stepped forward and addressed the gathered shinobi. This mission will take us to the front lines against the hidden mist. Many of you come from other battlefields, which means you will face entirely new enemies. Everything may feel unfamiliar at first, but ninja of Konoha do not fear the unknown. We fight to protect our homes and the people we care about. For that reason, we will be fearless. Prepare yourselves. It is time to depart. The assembled ninja remained silent. Everyone present understood the seriousness of war. Still, Tsukumo's words strengthened their resolve. After a brief pause, Hayashi stepped forward and officially announced the departure of the force. This unit consisted entirely of ninja. Supplies and escorts would be collected at the daimyo's residence, where everything had already been prepared. At the speed they were traveling, the force would likely reach the front lines in about 3 days. Meanwhile, far away in the Hokage office, Hiruzen silently lit his pipe after watching the troops leave. Inside Kirigakure in the Mizukage's office, a strange scene was unfolding. A man wearing a white mask sat in the Mizukage's seat. Meanwhile, the Yagura Karatachi, the fourth Mizukage, stood beside him like a subordinate. At that moment, a massive pitcher plant slowly rose from the floor. "You are back," the masked man asked as White Zetsu appeared. "What is the current situation?" White Zetsu spoke calmly. Konoha currently holds the advantage in the land of wind under Orochimaru's leadership. Both sides remain locked in a stalemate in the land of grass, but the Inoki the third Tsuchikage, has deployed the Four Tails Jinchuriki. Konoha also suffered heavy losses in the land of hot water. Commander Danzo Shimura was seriously injured, and the third Hokage has sent Hamura Mitokado as reinforcement. The intelligence White Zetsu provided was astonishingly detailed, almost as if he had direct access to reports from every battlefield. Even the casualty numbers from both sides were extremely precise. After listening, the masked man tapped the desk lightly. As expected of Konoha. Even while being pressured by several nations, they still managed to hold their ground. However, this situation works in our favor. The longer this war lasts, the more every village will weaken. The goal of the Eye of the Moon plan was to collect the tailed beasts. Unfortunately, every hidden village currently guarded their Jinchuriki closely. Although he had gradually mastered the power of the Mangekyo Sharingan, he was not Madara Uchiha. He had not yet reached the level where he could suppress an entire village alone. More importantly, because he had once used Izanagi, he had transplanted one of his father's Sharingan. Although this restored his vision, it created an extremely troublesome problem. The pattern of the Mangekyo Sharingan in his eyes was now mismatched. Because of that, he could not awaken the ultimate power of the Sharingan. Susanoo. Madara had once used that power to battle Hashirama Senju. If he could unlock it, he believed he could sweep across the 5 great nations. Looking toward White Zetsu, he asked quietly, "Did you find the information I requested?" White Zetsu nodded. "Your father's Mangekyo Sharingan should currently be in Orochimaru's possession." "Orochimaru," the masked man muttered thoughtfully. "Can you steal it?" "It will be difficult," White Zetsu replied. Orochimaru hides his most important items inside the stomachs of his summoned creatures. I cannot enter Ryuchi Cave. Then continue monitoring him. Eventually he will take it out for research. White Zetsu nodded. At that moment Black Zetsu, who had been silent until now, spoke. There is something else you might find interesting. What is it? White Zetsu continued. White Fang and Lightning Flash have already departed in this direction with 1,000 ninja. Uchiha Hayashi has arrived. The masked man's expression remained hidden behind the mask, but his gaze lowered slightly. Since he refuses to remain in the land of wind, I will prepare a special gift to congratulate him on becoming a commander. Chapter 441, Orders from the Shadows. 1,223 words. Oh? As Fugaku spoke, Black Zetsu's eyes twitched slightly. After spending countless years observing and manipulating people, it could read intentions with ease. The moment it heard Fugaku's tone, it already understood what he was thinking. Just as expected, Fugaku asked in the next moment, can the front lines conduct a forced march into the land of fire and ambush Konoha's forces? Black Zetsu dismissed the idea immediately. Impossible. Their force numbers more than 1,000 ninja. Ambushing a unit that large is unrealistic, especially when Tsukumo Hitaki, the White Fang, and Lightning Flash Hayashi are both present. Fugaku nodded, showing he understood. Although his power and ambitions had grown significantly, he had never truly commanded a battlefield. For now, he mostly listened to the intelligence gathered by White Zetsu, proposed ideas, and discussed their feasibility with Black Zetsu. The will left behind by Madara Uchiha existed not only to monitor Fugaku, but also to prevent him from recklessly rushing into situations and ruining everything. Falling into darkness could happen in an instant. Power could surge overnight. Intelligence, however, was different. Wearing a mask did not suddenly grant someone the mind of a master strategist. Fugaku possessed strength, but if he wanted to become the hidden mastermind controlling events from the shadows, he still had much to learn. Fortunately, he now had the entire Kirigakure to practice with. In a sense, this war served as his training ground. When it ended, the perfect moment would arrive to put his true plan into motion. In that case, Fugaku said quietly after a moment of thought, order the Kirigakure ninja stationed in the Land of Waves to launch an offensive toward the Land of Fire. The Land of Waves. White Zetsu replied with some doubt. But we suffered heavy losses in the Land of Bears not long ago. Can the front lines recover that quickly? We will simply use numbers, Fugaku answered calmly. Konoha is currently fighting multiple nations at once. Every ninja matters to them. Hidden Mist does not face the same pressure. To Fugaku, the situation was simple. If this group of Mist ninja died, he could simply send more from the village. Hidden Mist was fighting only Konohagakure, and from a purely numerical perspective, they held the advantage. Unless a conflict was a life or death struggle, no village would normally exhaust its own forces against Konoha the way Fugaku was willing to. However, the Hidden Mist village was not truly his. Even if every single ninja from Kirigakure died, he would feel nothing. As long as Konoha was weakened, the outcome would still benefit him. By the way, Fugaku continued, how is my clone inside the Konoha camp? As you ordered, it has been keeping a low profile, White Zetsu replied with a sly smile. But if you stay away much longer, your position as head of the Uchiha clan may not remain yours. Fugaku's expression remained calm as he nodded slightly. Originally, the idea of sending a clone to impersonate him had been nothing more than a temporary measure. He wanted to prevent Tatsumi from easily consolidating control of the clan. However, with time he had come to realize something. Competing with Tatsumi for the position of clan head was unrealistic. Near the end of the Second Great Ninja War, Fugaku had nearly led many members of the Uchiha clan to their deaths during a disastrous battle against Sunagakure. His reputation had fallen sharply. Meanwhile, Tatsumi had continued to accumulate achievements on the battlefield. Within the clan, no one could rival his growing prestige. Without the protection of his father, inheriting the clan leadership as a young successor would have been impossible. He had considered eliminating Tatsumi. However, Tatsumi's growth had been far too rapid. Fugaku could not confidently say he would win such a confrontation. There were technically other ways to secure leadership. He could lead the clan to great victories during this war. Or he could reveal the power of his Mangekyo Sharingan. But neither option aligned with his current plans. After long and bitter consideration, Fugaku had abandoned the idea of becoming clan head, and instead stepped into the shadows. Eventually, everyone would see Fugaku as a failure. No one would bother paying attention to him. That anonymity would become the perfect cover for the day he seized the nine-tailed fox. Seeing Fugaku fall silent, White Zetsu curled its lip slightly but said nothing more. Soon the massive pitcher plant sank back into the ground and disappeared. The Mizuki's office returned to silence. Only Yagura Karatachi remained standing motionless while Fugaku sat quietly in the chair. On the coastline of the Land of Waves, within a hidden mist military camp, the night was calm. Suddenly, a sharp cry echoed across the sky. A gerfalcon cut through the darkness and descended rapidly toward the camp. A Kirigakure ninja standing guard stepped forward from the shadows. When he noticed the word urgent written on the scroll attached to the bird's leg, his expression immediately changed. He unsealed the message and hurried toward the command tent. Inside, the commander Terumi frowned as he examined the scroll. Why would the fourth Mizuki send orders at this hour, he muttered. Still puzzled, he broke the seal and opened the message. Moments later, his face darkened. Sir, what is it? A subordinate asked. The Yagura, the fourth Mizuki, has ordered a full assault on the Konoha camp at dawn tomorrow, Sora said while rolling the scroll closed. But we just fought them, the subordinate protested. Many of our men are still wounded, and Konoha's reconnaissance teams watch the coastline constantly. Any movement will be detected immediately. Sora sighed quietly. He was fully aware of the situation. However, when Yagura had launched his coup in Kirigakure, Sora had chosen not to oppose him. Now that Yagura ruled the village, refusing a direct order would be no different from suicide. Still, Sora slowly handed a map to his subordinate. This shows every Konoha scout stationed along the coast. The subordinate's eyes widened in shock. But the Mizuki is in Hidden Mist Village. How could he know such detailed information? Sora forced a bitter smile. He was stationed here on the front lines, yet even he did not possess intelligence this precise. The only explanation was that the Mizuki controlled an extremely powerful intelligence network. Even from far away, he could see everything happening on this battlefield. A cold chill ran down Sora's spine. He did not know exactly what had happened on the night the third Mizuki disappeared. However, since he had participated in the political struggle that followed, he was certain of one thing. Yagura had been involved. After the third Mizuki vanished, Yagura used the chaos to convene the Five Kage Summit and ignite the current war. Everything seemed carefully planned. And yet, the Yagura standing at the top of Kirigakure now felt completely different from the man Sora once knew. He felt distant. Unfamiliar. Almost like a different person entirely. A dangerous suspicion formed in Sora's mind, but he dared not speak it aloud. He feared that voicing such thoughts might lead to a sudden and inexplicable death. After a long silence, Sora finally looked up and gave his order. Prepare everyone. At 5 o'clock tomorrow morning, we attack the Konoha camp. Chapter 441, 442, Interrupted Confession. 1,377 words. In the early morning, the sea was covered in thick fog. Just after stepping out of the tent, a gentle breeze drifted in from the sea. The air was warm and pleasant. Nawaki and Nona walked through the quiet camp, glancing around as they moved. Everything was calm, just like any other morning. This should have been a time for rest. However, Nono had just finished a long surgery. After remaining in intense concentration for hours, she no longer felt sleepy. Instead, she sought out Nawaki, who was on patrol duty, and decided to accompany him on a walk through the camp. You've worked really hard, Nawaki said apologetically while lowering his head. After we finish checking this last area, you should head back and rest. Over the past 2 years, Nawaki had grown rapidly. His height had shot up, and he now stood more than a head taller than Nono. Nono shook her head, smiling gently. I should be the one apologizing. You're already busy the entire day, yet you still take time to walk with me at night. Nawaki's face immediately turned red. It was true that he volunteered for patrol duty to protect the camp, but the real reason was that Nono often performed surgeries late into the night. Now that his thoughts had been seen through, Nawaki scratched his head awkwardly, unsure what to say next. Should he use the faint-to-catch tactic that Hayashi taught him? Or should he try the relentless pursuit method that Jiraiya once mentioned? An awkward silence filled the air. Seeing Nawaki's slightly foolish expression, Nono adjusted the frame of her black glasses and decided to speak first. I don't think I've ever seen you come to me for treatment. I rarely get injured, Nawaki replied honestly. Even if I do, my sister can treat me, so there's no need to trouble you. Nono pressed her hand to her forehead helplessly, suddenly feeling tired. Seeing her reaction, Nawaki asked cautiously. Did I say something wrong? No, she replied softly. It's just that my head hurts a little after being out in the wind for so long. Then drink more. Nawaki suddenly stopped himself mid-sentence. Drink more what? Nono asked with a faint smile. Don't tell me you were about to say drink more hot water. Nawaki felt embarrassed. That was exactly what he had been about to say. However, he suddenly remembered the forbidden phrase Hayashi once warned him about, so he stopped. Then how about this, Nawaki said quickly. I'll walk you to the garrison hospital so you can take a look. Nono raised her delicate eyebrows slightly. So he was not completely hopeless. It's fine. There's no need to go, she said gently. Don't forget, I'm a medical ninja myself. Then, all right. Nono brushed her bangs aside and continued the conversation. You said earlier that you rarely get injured. Yeah. You know the Senju clan has strong recovery ability. Then after becoming a ninja, what was the most serious injury you've ever suffered? She asked curiously. Nawaki rubbed his chin seriously and thought for a moment. Then he spoke quietly. I remember it was in the land of rain. That night there was heavy rain. Hayashi and I were standing guard when I suddenly realized something. What was it? Nono asked. Nawaki sighed. I realized that Hayashi had a girlfriend holding an umbrella for him, while I didn't. For a moment, Nono fell silent. Then Nawaki slowly narrowed his eyes, and his demeanor subtly changed. Looking at her seriously, he spoke softly. So are you willing to hold an umbrella for me? They stood together in the open area of the camp. The sky was still dim, touched with a faint red glow from the rising sun. In the distance, the sea remained hidden behind thick fog, and the soft wind gently brushed through their hair. The scenery was beautiful. The atmosphere felt perfect. And the timing could not have been better. After gathering courage for a long time, Nawaki finally stepped forward. He gently wrapped an arm around Nono's waist, his fingers sliding through her golden hair. The girl trembled slightly, but she did not resist. Instead, she slowly closed her eyes. Seeing this, Nawaki, unusually bold tonight, leaned down gradually. In such a quiet and comfortable moment, a kiss felt completely natural. But at that exact moment, boom! About 1 kilometer away from the Konoha camp, near the coastline, a burst of fire suddenly shot into the sky and exploded. Nawaki froze. Nono froze. Swish, swish, swish. The instant the explosion sounded, ninjas throughout the camp rushed out from their tents and various posts, quickly gathering together. After experiencing so many battles, everyone's combat awareness had become extremely sharp. Seeing everyone rushing out, Nono's face turned even redder. She quickly and gently pushed Nawaki away, who had been only a few centimeters from her lips. Lowering her head, she spoke softly. "We'll talk about this after we return. I need to go to the hospital and organize things first." "Okay," Nawaki replied. After watching her leave, his expression immediately changed. Anger erupted within him. Clenching his teeth, Nawaki jumped in frustration and shouted toward the distance. "You missed ninjas, I'm going to kill you." At that moment, Hayashi Hyuga appeared beside him. Hayashi glanced at Nawaki in confusion. "Nawaki, what's wrong with you?" This was the first time he had seen Nawaki so furious. The slight ferocity on his face, and the sound of his grinding teeth, were especially noticeable. How much hatred did he have? "It's nothing," Nawaki said while exhaling slowly and forcing himself to calm down. He then glanced at the Konoha ninjas gathering behind him. "Let's go." With a loud shout, Nawaki led the group as they rushed out of the camp. "What exactly is happening?" Standing near the camp, the elderly Uchiha Hikari asked seriously. "It seems the mist has launched a surprise attack," said Shikaku Nara, who was currently acting as the commander. "A surprise attack? Are they insane?" Uchiha Hikari asked in disbelief. "Launching an attack immediately after landing would cause enormous casualties for the mist forces." "Maybe they really are," Shikaku replied thoughtfully. After a moment he continued. "Another possibility is that they divided part of their forces, bypassed our defensive line, and attempted to attack from behind." Behind the Konoha garrison lay a wide plain, with no defensive traps such as explosive tags. "That shouldn't be possible," Uchiha Hikari said with surprise. "There are so many sensory ninjas along the coastline. They should have detected it earlier. There are many sensory ninjas, but the coastline is too long. Gaps are inevitable." Shikaku paused briefly. "However, I have already sent Hisashi Hyuga and Himeji with a group of ninjas to investigate the rear. If something is wrong, we should receive a signal soon." Uchiha Hikari nodded. In such a short time, Shikaku had already assigned tasks to every unit. The Nara clan might not possess overwhelming combat strength, but their intelligence was exceptional. Boom! A red flare slowly rose into the sky in the distance before exploding. Seeing the signal, Shikaku's eyes turned serious. "It seems my guess was correct." He quickly issued orders. "Send the command down. The first column gathers at the designated location. The second column moves out immediately to support Hisashi." "Yes." A Jonin hurried away to relay the command. "The mist must have learned that Hayashi and Tsukumo Hatake have already set out," Uchiha Hikari said quietly. "They want to attack us before they arrive." "That should be the case," Shikaku agreed with a nod. However, his expression remained troubled. "But there's something else that concerns me even more." "What is it?" "How did the enemy learn about our deployment?" Uchiha Hikari frowned. "That shouldn't be possible." "If there was no information leak," Shikaku said slowly, clenching his fists, "then I cannot explain how the enemy bypassed our reconnaissance ninjas and quietly reached our rear." He took a deep breath before speaking solemnly. "So I suspect that we have a spy within the frontline command. And their rank is not low. .. Look up _Zeph on Patreon to get access to chapters in advance. Chapter 443, Clash on the Coast. 1,443 words. Although Shikaku Nara quickly issued a series of commands, Konoha was still caught off guard by the sudden assault from the hidden mist. The main reason was that the reconnaissance units deployed along the coast had failed in their duty. Because of this gap, the enemy managed to slip behind Konoha's lines and complete a partial encirclement. The hidden mist clearly intended to exchange casualties head-on. Their goal was obvious: reduce Konoha's active forces as much as possible before reinforcements and the two commanders arrived. This level of recklessness was completely unexpected. Both sides had just fought a major battle recently. Under normal circumstances, this period should have been a tense stalemate, a time to rest and regroup while watching the opponent carefully. After all, ninjas were still human beings, not tireless war machines. However, the moment this sudden battle began, Konoha had no choice but to respond with full force, even if they had been pushed into the fight without preparation. On the coastline, staring at the approaching hidden mist troops that were already clearly visible through the fog, Nawaki quickly formed hand seals. Ninjutsu, summoning technique. A massive slug appeared in a cloud of smoke. Yes, Nawaki had ultimately chosen the slug as his summoned partner. Among the creatures of the three great summoning regions, the toads of Mount Myaboku possessed the most versatile combat style. After all, toads had 4 limbs and could perform a wide range of physical techniques. But Nawaki had no interest in following the path of the toad sage. For the same reason, he also rejected the snake summons from Ryuchi Cave. In the end, he chose the slugs of Shikatsu Forest. Part of the reason was personal preference, but there was also another thought behind his decision. Nawaki wanted to form a new trio modeled after the legendary Sannin, consisting of himself, Hayashi, and Minato Namikaze. 3 outstanding shinobi from Konoha should not all share the same summon. Many people underestimated slugs because they appeared less flashy than toads. However, among the 3 summoning types, slugs arguably possessed the greatest strategic value. Their combat power was far from weak. They could release highly corrosive acid capable of damaging enemies instantly. More importantly, they could provide constant healing support to allied shinobi. With slugs present, it was almost like having a dedicated support medic on the battlefield. Under Nawaki's direction, the giant slug immediately divided into countless smaller slugs. Each one crawled onto the shoulders of the nearby Konoha shinobi. This method of fighting was already familiar to everyone present. No one showed surprise as the small slugs settled into place. Like the toads of Mount Myaboku, slugs were not fond of seawater. Fortunately, they did not need to fight directly. Their role was to remain on the shoulders of the ninjas and provide support. If they were forced into the sea, the battlefield itself would soon push them back toward the shore anyway. Attack. Watching the hidden mist forces rushing forward aggressively, Nawaki stood at the front of the Konoha formation with more than 100 shinobi behind him. His hands moved through another sequence of seals. Right now, no one hated the hidden mist more than Nawaki. If possible, he would have liked nothing more than to drive them straight into the ground. Water release, great waterfall technique. Even in locations without natural water sources, skilled shinobi could create enormous quantities of water with chakra. Standing beside the ocean made the technique even more terrifying. A massive surge of water burst from Nawaki's mouth, crashing forward like a towering waterfall that rose more than 10 meters high. Seeing their village's signature technique used so powerfully by an enemy, Biwa Juzo, carrying the massive Kubikurubocho on his shoulder, showed little surprise. The two sides had fought too many battles already. Each knew the other very well. Water release, water dragon bullet technique. Nawaki shifted his seals again. The massive current formed by the great waterfall technique twisted and condensed, transforming into a giant dragon of water that lunged toward the hidden mist ranks. Swish! At that moment, Jinpachi Munashi from the 7 ninja swordsmen of the mist stepped forward. With a downward swing of his blade, a scroll packed with explosive tags flew directly into the path of the water dragon. Detonate! Using the power of his sword, the explosive tags ignited instantly. The violent explosion shattered the water dragon bullet, dispersing the attack before it could reach the hidden mist formation. Swish! 4 more figures rushed out through the smoke of the blast. They were the remaining members of the 7 ninja swordsmen present on the battlefield. Aside from the already deceased Raiga Kurasuke, only Fuguki Suikazan was absent. Water release, great waterfall technique. Biwa Juzo rapidly formed seals and countered Nawaki's attack with the same technique. At the same time, Hayashi Hyuga stepped forward. Gentle Fist Art, 8 trigrams vacuum palm. A powerful burst of chakra shot from his palm toward Kushimaru Kuriere, who wore a hidden mist ANBU mask with thick bandages wrapped around his neck. Kushimaru reacted instantly. His sword, Nuibari, jerked backward as the long wire attached to it tightened. A captured Konoha ninja was dragged violently behind the blade. Hayashi's attack narrowly missed. In the next instant, the Kobikirabocho cut across the battlefield with terrifying force. Clang! Hayashi raised a kunai to block the strike. However, the massive strength behind the blade quickly overwhelmed him. Within seconds he was knocked backward, his arm numb from the impact. The swordsman would never ignore such an opening. Several attacks immediately followed. But just as they were about to strike, additional Konoha shinobi arrived and intercepted the attacks of the swordsman. Hayashi used the brief opportunity to regain his balance before charging forward again. Soon, the battlefield became a violent clash of forces. Two torrents of shinobi collided head-on. At the same time, deep in the rear area of the Konoha encampment, Hizashi Hyuga and Himeji had also encountered trouble. The two had led several reconnaissance ninjas to investigate the suspicious activity detected behind the camp. What they discovered was a small group of Konoha ninjas being surrounded by hidden mist shinobi. Instinctively, they moved in to support their comrades. However, the moment they engaged, the hidden mist ninjas trapped them as well. Soon afterward, additional mist forces appeared from both flanks. Although a signal flare had already been launched, the second Konoha unit was still far away. They would not arrive soon enough. "What should we do?" a middle-aged ninja asked urgently, glancing at the mist shinobi closing in behind them. "There are too many enemies. Our squad will stay behind and cover the retreat," said a black-haired jonin through clenched teeth. His team had been the group originally trapped by the mist. Without the reinforcements from the others, they would have already died. "No," another ninja said firmly. His face carried streaks of paint, and he rode atop a swift black dog. He was clearly a member of the Inuzuka clan. Konoha shinobi do not abandon their comrades. Hizashi remained silent for a moment before speaking. "The two squad leaders will stay behind to cover the retreat." There were two leaders present. One was Hizashi himself. The other was the black-haired jonin who had spoken earlier. "No." The quiet voice of Himeji interrupted them. "Himeji," Hizashi said seriously, "you are from the main family, and you are my sister. I must protect you." He paused briefly. "Let your second brother decide how he dies." "No. I will not allow it," Himeji said stubbornly. Her voice, usually calm and reserved, carried unusual determination. "I already called for reinforcements. The second unit is still far away," Hizashi replied. "Not them," Himeji said softly. Earlier, she had sent the small black snake that always followed her to deliver a message. By now, the preparations on the other side should already be complete. Standing on the branch of a large tree, Himeji took a blue vial from her ninja pouch. She poured the blood inside onto her palm. Summoning technique. Smoke exploded outward. Seeing this, Gama Inuzuka, who had stopped nearby, nudged Hizashi with his elbow. "Captain, I have never seen Himeji use a summon before," he said curiously. "What kind of creature is it? Is it strong?" As the smoke slowly cleared, a young man stepped forward from the summoning circle. A small white snake rested calmly around his neck. When Hizashi saw the young man's face clearly, his usually stern expression changed instantly. His mouth slowly opened in shock. "It is indeed very strong." Chapter 443, 444, A Beast on the Battlefield. 1583 words. Let us turn the clock back 3 minutes. Along a forest route in the Land of Fire, a large unit of ninja was dismantling a temporary camp. Tents were being folded, supplies packed, and sentries rotated. The plan was simple: once the sun rose, the unit would continue advancing toward the coastline. For a short time, the quiet forest clearing was filled with voices, footsteps, and the sounds of equipment being secured. After completing a routine inspection of the camp, Commander Hayashi made his way toward the central tent. Inside, a white-haired ninja sat hunched over breakfast. The men looked up the moment Hayashi entered. Tsukumo Hatake raised a rice ball casually. "Have you eaten?" Hayashi pulled over a stool and sat down. "I just finished eating with Mikoto." A faint sigh escaped Tsukumo. "Must be nice. Someone actually looking after you. Your sister Oichi isn't a ninja, otherwise I would have brought her along too." Hayashi rolled his eyes when he noticed the somewhat wistful look on Tsukumo's face. "I don't believe that for a second. Even if she were a ninja, you still wouldn't allow her to come." Tsukumo chuckled. "Ha, maybe you're right." He finished the rice ball quickly and brushed the crumbs from his hands. "Anything unusual in the camp?" "Nothing so far," Hayashi replied calmly. "At our current pace we should reach the front line by tomorrow." Tsukumo nodded thoughtfully. "I wonder how Kirigakure compares to Sunagakure." Hayashi was just about to warn him about the strange nature of that village, and especially about the leadership in Kirigakure, when his expression suddenly stiffened. Something had called to him. Tsukumo noticed the change immediately. "What is it?" Hayashi did not answer right away. Instead, he rapidly formed a series of hand seals. A cloud of smoke burst inside the tent. When the smoke cleared, a large white snake had appeared. "Big White." Tsukumo blinked. Hayashi looked at the summon sharply. "What happened?" The large snake raised its head. Little Black sent a message. "Kirigakure attacked the outpost. Himeji is in danger." Hayashi's pupils shrank instantly. The relaxed look on his face vanished. Tsukumo frowned. "Little Black. The front line is in trouble." At the moment, command of the forward forces had been given to Shikaku Nara. His intelligence was unquestionable, but his combat strength was not suited for overwhelming enemy forces. Hayashi stood up. "Little Black is the snake I left with Himeji to carry messages. If it sent word, it means Kirigakure launched an attack. I have to go." Tsukumo immediately realized the problem. "Support the front." "How?" "You're hundreds of kilometers away. Even at full speed, no shinobi could reach the battlefield in time. By the time he arrived, the fighting would already be over." Hayashi lifted Big White and placed the snake around his shoulders like a scarf. "Himeji carries some of my blood. That means she can summon Big White. And Big White can summon me." Tsukumo understood immediately. "The summoning jutsu." Hayashi nodded. "Be careful. The front line is yours." "Understood." He paused briefly before adding. "Please explain it to Mikoto for me." Tsukumo gave a small wave. "Go." Hayashi disappeared instantly. The moment his vision returned, the scenery had completely changed. He had arrived at the battlefield. The first person he saw was Himeji. She stood tall in white robes, her posture calm and composed. Even on a battlefield, she maintained her usual quiet dignity. When she saw Hayashi appear, a faint smile appeared on her normally stoic face. Hayashi stepped forward, intending to greet her warmly. However, before he could reach her, a man suddenly stepped between them with an obvious cough. Hayashi stared at the sour expression. For a moment, he genuinely struggled to remember which Hyuga this was. Normally, his younger brother Hisashi Hyuga wore that gloomy look, especially after receiving the caged bird seal. But the deep wrinkles on this man's forehead made it look like he had aged 10 years overnight. Considering the situation, Hayashi chose the safest option. He smiled brightly. "Good morning, Hayashi nii." Fortunately, he had guessed correctly. Hayashi Hyuga only gave a quiet grunt. In the distance, Kirigakure forces were already approaching. The enemy was roughly 500 meters away. 500 meters sounded far, but on a battlefield it was extremely close. Back on Earth, trained snipers could strike targets from more than a kilometer away. If Hayashi possessed that kind of long-distance weaponry here, he could have eliminated the entire enemy force without leaving the camp. His relaxed expression disappeared. "Go," he said calmly. "I'll hold them off." The surrounding Konoha ninja hesitated. Everyone knew Hayashi was strong, but there were more than 100 enemy shinobi approaching. Seeing the hesitation in their eyes, Hayashi said nothing further. Inside, however, he sighed. These subordinates were really not up to standard. When a commander gave an order, it should be obeyed immediately. Perhaps the disciplined spirit of Konoha's high-level command had not fully spread to these lower-ranked ninja yet. Naturally, in Hayashi's mind, everyone present except Himeji and Hizashi fell into that category. By now, the Kirigakure force had closed to less than 50 meters. Both sides could clearly see each other's faces. Hayashi stepped forward and began forming hand seals. Earth release, Great Mud River. The moment the jutsu was completed, the ground across dozens of meters suddenly softened and collapsed into a vast swamp. The soil churned violently like a raging beast. Several unprepared Kirigakure ninja were instantly dragged into the flowing mud. Before the enemy could even react, Hayashi formed another seal. Multiple shadow clone jutsu. 4 clones appeared beside him. The instant they materialized, each clone began forming a different sequence of hand seals aimed at the approaching enemy force. As a direct disciple of Hiruzen Sarutobi, Hayashi had mastered all 5 basic chakra natures. For him, combining multiple elemental techniques felt as natural as breathing. "Stop him from finishing those seals," someone shouted. The man yelling the order was the Mist Squad leader, Fuguki Suikazan. But his anger was pointless. If he had possessed the ability to interrupt Hayashi's hand seals, he would not eventually lose Samahata to the shark-faced ninja, who would wield it in the future. Still, Fuguki was one of the 7 ninja swordsmen of the mist. His strength was real. Since he could not stop the technique directly, he chose another option. Chakra surged through his body. His belly expanded dramatically. Water release, exploding water colliding wave. A massive torrent erupted forward like a rising tsunami. Fuguki intended to flood the battlefield and create a lake, weakening the power of whatever attack Hayashi was preparing. However, water release techniques required a long sequence of hand seals. Even this technique needed 17 seals. By the time Fuguki finished them, Hayashi had already completed his own. The clones spoke simultaneously. Wind release. Lightning release. Fire release. Water release. Earth release. Then all 5 voices merged into one. 5-element unison, Great Blast. This powerful combination technique, once created by the 3rd Hokage, erupted across the battlefield once again during the 3rd Great Ninja War. The violent explosion swallowed everything ahead. When the blast finally faded, the forest in front of Hayashi had completely vanished. The Kirigakure formation had instantly lost more than 100 ninja. On most battlefields, such devastating results were extremely rare. Even the famous Great Fire Annihilation used by Madara Uchiha could be countered if enough ninja used water release together. Experienced commanders usually kept reserve units prepared specifically to neutralize large-scale ninjutsu. Sometimes flashy techniques ended up killing fewer enemies than a few precise attacks. But this time was different. Hayashi's sudden arrival had caught Kirigakure completely off guard. Fuguki had spent half the day hunting the Konoha unit, never imagining that a monster like this would suddenly appear among them. From above, the battlefield now looked strangely divided. On one side stood the Konoha ninja. On the other stood the remaining Kirigakure forces. Between them stretched a wide empty field. Even though the mist forces still had the numerical advantage, not a single one dared step forward. Every pair of eyes was locked onto the black-clad shinobi who had appeared from nowhere. Hayashi stood calmly. His appearance was tall and handsome, yet the aura surrounding him felt like that of a grim reaper collecting lives. His crimson Sharingan slowly swept across the Kirigakure ranks. Wherever his gaze passed, Mist Ninja involuntarily swallowed and stepped back. The pressure was overwhelming. Hayashi finally turned away. "Let's go." He gently took Himeji's hand and led her back toward the Konoha camp, treating her with the calm protectiveness of an older brother guiding someone under his care. Beside them, Hisashi's eyes were wide with disbelief, but he said nothing. What he had just witnessed had clearly shaken him. As they walked, Hayashi asked, "Any reinforcements?" "Yes, sir," replied Inuzuka Ueo, his eyes bright with excitement. "The second column should arrive very soon." His small ninja dog, Kuramaru, barked once and rolled its eyes with an almost human expression. Hayashi nodded. "Good." He looked back toward the distant Kirigakure army. "We'll regroup with the second column." Then he issued his second command since arriving. "And then we wiped them out." This time, not a single ninja hesitated. Everyone moved immediately. The terrifying power they had just witnessed had erased all doubt. If you want to read more, check out my Patreon. Patreon.com/Zeph. Chapter 445, Escape of the Mist Swordsman. 1419 words. War is slaughter. This is an undeniable truth. Whether it is a surprise attack or a prolonged siege, every battle eventually comes down to individual ninja. A war may appear to be decided by armies, but in reality it is decided by the courage and resolve of the people fighting it. Once the morale of individual ninja collapses, even an army with overwhelming numbers cannot secure victory. This truth had already become painfully clear to Fuguki Suikazen the moment Konoha's lightning flash appeared on the battlefield, and wiped out hundreds of his subordinates in an instant. At that moment, the idea of retreat naturally surfaced in his mind. When Uchiha Shin led the 2nd Division of Konoha Ninja, and began encircling the battlefield, that thought quickly grew from a small seed into a concrete decision. Fight to the death? No. Fuguki shook his head slightly. Years of brutal warfare had already taught him a simple rule. A dead ninja gains nothing, while a living one always has another opportunity. His priority was survival. And if survival was his goal, returning to the village was not an option either. This mission had failed. Hundreds of Mist Ninja had died under his command. With the temperament of the 4th Mizukage, there was no telling what kind of punishment awaited him. He had grown tired of the cold, ruthless atmosphere of Kirigakure. The only reason he had never left before was because he was accustomed to life there, and until now he had never made a mistake serious enough to justify abandoning the village. But things were different now. As for where he would go afterward, the ninja world was vast. Surely there would be somewhere he could survive. Besides, this was the time of the Third Great Ninja War. Although Kirigakure maintained hunter squads that pursued rogue ninja, the village likely would not waste valuable manpower chasing a single deserter during a global war. After reaching this conclusion, Fuguki quickly issued orders for his remaining forces to engage the advancing Konoha 2nd Division. At the same time, under the cover of the mist technique spreading across the battlefield, he created a water clone. While the clone remained among the fighting troops, his real body quietly slipped away toward the interior of the Land of Fire. He believed that after causing enough chaos, escaping would not be difficult. Unfortunately for him, things were not so simple. Fuguki was the commander of the mist forces. Because of that, Shin had already asked Himeji to keep a close watch on him. The moment Fuguki attempted to flee, Shin reacted. With a simple motion, he hooked his right hand and slit the throat of a nearby enemy ninja who had been rushing toward him. The man collapsed instantly. Without even pausing, Shin turned and chased after Fuguki. As Fuguki ran through the mist, he sensed something behind him. A faint disturbance in the air. A sharp sound cutting through the wind. Even without turning around, his combat instincts told him everything he needed to know. Someone was chasing him. The instant the pursuer closed the distance, Fuguki suddenly spun around. His right fist clenched tightly as he launched an upward strike. The attack cut through empty air. Shin moved like a ghost. His body shifted slightly, effortlessly avoiding the punch before sliding backward and creating distance between himself and the enormous bandaged blade in Fuguki's hand. Fuguki immediately swung the massive weapon downward. The huge sword wrapped in white bandages slammed into the ground. The impact shattered the earth, cracks spreading across the surface like a spider web. The weapon was none other than Samahata. Shin calmly studied the man in front of him. Fuguki's orange hair and bulky build made him look somewhat similar to one of Jiraiya's larger summoning toads. Instead of attacking immediately, Shin spoke with mild curiosity. Your subordinates are still fighting behind you, yet you're already planning to run away. How do you intend to explain that to Yagura Karatachi when you return? Fuguki's lips curled into a sinister grin. This attack was planned by the 4th Mizukage. The front-line commander is Mei Terumi. He snorted coldly. Neither of them bothered investigating the strength of the Konoha ninja stationed here before sending us to attack. If something goes wrong, the responsibility should not fall on me. Shin raised an eyebrow. Even so, your Mizukage is not known for being reasonable. Especially after you abandoned your own subordinates. Fuguki's expression hardened. I don't care whether he's reasonable or not. I have no intention of seeing him again anyway. Shin paused slightly, clearly surprised. What do you mean? Fuguki's eyes flickered as he spoke. Konoha's lightning flash, you are the commander here. That means this battlefield is under your authority. He continued calmly. How about we make a deal? Shin crossed his arms slightly. What kind of deal? If I insist on escaping, you may not be able to stop me. During the pursuit, Konoha ninja will inevitably suffer casualties. Fuguki spoke with quiet confidence. But I can promise something. I will not kill any Konoha ninja during my escape, and I will never return to Kirigakure. He looked directly at Shin. Let me leave. Shin studied the orange-haired swordsman with visible interest. You are one of the 7 ninja swordsmen, and you're willing to abandon your village and become a rogue ninja. Fuguki gave a bitter smile. If the village was a place worth staying in, who would willingly become a rogue ninja? For a brief moment, Shin fell silent. In the original timeline, the 7 ninja swordsmen suffered a devastating defeat when they encountered Might Dai. After that battle, only Fuguki, Jizo Biwa, and Raiga Kurisuke survived. The latter two eventually abandoned Kirigakure and became rogue ninja. From that point onward, many successors of the 7 ninja swordsmen also ended up becoming missing ninja. Only Fuguki himself remained loyal to the village until he was eventually killed by Kisame Hoshigaki. But now things were different. Might Dai had not yet fought that legendary battle. Yet Fuguki was already planning to flee. The situation was strangely ironic. Of course, Shin had no intention of letting him go so easily. Would Fuguki truly avoid killing Konoha ninja just because he said so? Would he truly never return to Kirigakure? A ninja's true weapon was deception. Placing trust in an enemy's promise was the fastest way to die. This was a basic rule every ninja understood. Shin did not care about Fuguki's personal decision. He only cared about one thing. Shin raised his hand and pointed toward the massive bandaged blade. You can leave if you want. He smiled casually. But leave my sword behind. In Shin's eyes, Samahata was easily the most remarkable of the 7 ninja swords. Ignoring its rebellious temperament, the sword possessed extraordinary abilities. It could bite. It could absorb chakra. It could even heal its wielder by transferring stolen chakra. In critical moments, it could even merge with its user, allowing them to experience the unique state where man and weapon fight as one. There was even a strange legend surrounding Samahata. According to the story, the creature was originally a small fish that followed Isabu. It would cling to Isabu's belly, cleaning away leftover food while absorbing chakra from the beast before sending that energy back into its body. Of course, stories like that were better treated as myths. After all, a tailed beast made entirely of chakra would hardly need a sword to gather more chakra for itself. Shin had also heard an even more ridiculous rumor. Apparently Shikaku once confessed its feelings to Kurama, and turned hostile after being rejected. Did Shin believe that story? Well, perhaps it was not entirely impossible. Hearing Shin's request, Fuguki's expression darkened. His own combat ability was not extraordinary. At best, he was at the level of an elite jonin. Most of his strength came from Samahata itself. Giving up the blade would mean losing the very foundation of his power. Konoha's lightning flash, Fuguki growled. You already took the lightning sword. Don't be so greedy. Shin laughed lightly. What if I am greedy? He shrugged casually. People always eat from the bowl in front of them while looking at the pot on the stove. Sometimes they even think about the crops still growing in the field. He pointed at Samahata again. So even though I'm not particularly skilled with oversized weapons, I'm determined to take that sword. Chapter 445, 446, The Fall of the Samahata Wielder. 1291 words. Since there was nothing left to discuss, the battle resumed instantly. In the next moment, Suikazan Fuguki tightened his grip and raised Samahata with one hand. Chakra burst from his feet as he lunged forward with shocking speed, a pace that completely contradicted his massive physique. The way he advanced with his sword was strangely fluid, almost mesmerizing. Hayashi watched the movement with quiet admiration. The footwork reminded him of a combat style he had practiced endlessly in his previous life. Back then he had never truly grasped its essence, yet here in the ninja world he was seeing a perfect example of it used in real combat. Even while observing, his body moved instinctively. Hayashi shifted along the path of the incoming blade and dodged without hesitation. Blocking a weapon like Samahata with the small kunai in his hand would have been suicidal. Through his Sharingan, Hayashi clearly saw the dark blue barbs hidden beneath the bandages at the sword's tip. Those jagged spikes were quietly exposed, like the teeth of a waiting predator. If he tried to block with a kunai, Samahata would probably devour both the weapon and his arm in the process. The missed attack did not slow Fuguki down. Planting his right foot on the ground, he twisted his body with explosive force and swung Samahata again. The massive blade tore through the air as it slashed toward Hayashi. The weapon was enormous, clearly designed for a power-based fighter. In the hands of Fuguki, however, it moved with terrifying agility. While airborne, Hayashi inhaled deeply and released a scorching breath toward his opponent. Fire release, great fireball technique. The blazing sphere expanded instantly, roaring forward with intense heat. Fuguki reacted without hesitation. He lifted Samahata and swung upward, splitting the fireball apart from bottom to top. At the same time, the bandages around the sword shifted slightly. A wide mouth and thick tongue emerged from the blade's tip, revealing Samahata's living nature and obvious irritation. The weapon clearly disliked the heat. Hayashi did not follow up with another fire technique. He already knew it would be useless. Samahata could absorb chakra. Any ninjutsu attack would simply become nourishment for the sword. The same logic applied to sealing methods that targeted ninja tools. Since those techniques also relied on chakra, Samahata would likely neutralize them. Activating Sage Mode was another possibility, but Hayashi had no intention of doing that right now. Whether Samahata could handle natural energy was an interesting question, perhaps something to test in the future. For the moment, he had a far simpler way to fight. 8 gates, 5th gate, open. Chakra erupted from his body. A powerful green aura burst outward, surging around Hayashi like a storm. His face flushed red as intense power flooded his muscles, and his eyes sharpened with fierce focus. The air around him rippled. Years ago he had only been able to open the 3rd gate. Now his body could handle the 5th gate of the 8 gates. His training in taijutsu had strengthened his body enough to handle the strain, while his strong vitality allowed him to recover from the backlash more easily than most shinobi. Of course, Hayashi had never been obsessed with pushing the technique to its absolute limit. He had no desire to gamble his life by opening the gate of death. Using the fifth gate was already more than enough. If his opponent had been Kisame Hoshigaki, the situation would be different. But against Fuguki, the fifth gate would suffice. Hayashi vanished. His body moved like a phantom, appearing behind the massive orange-haired swordsman in an instant. Even though Hayashi's speed had increased dramatically, Fuguki was still a seasoned jonin. The moment Hayashi appeared behind him, Fuguki reacted on instinct and attempted to swing Samehada. However, awareness alone was not enough. His body simply could not keep up. Before the sword could complete its motion, Hayashi's kick had already landed. The impact exploded against Fuguki's chest. The huge shinobi was launched through the air like a rag doll. Blood surged into his throat and nearly choked him, as the crushing force spread through his ribs. Fortunately, Samehada immediately began feeding him chakra, helping him stabilize his condition. Before Fuguki could recover, Hayashi appeared in front of him again. Fuguki relied on pure battle instinct. The moment Hayashi materialized, Samehada suddenly expanded and slammed forward in a wide horizontal strike aimed at Hayashi's head. The strike hit nothing. It had only sliced through an afterimage. Hayashi was already above him. Suspended in mid-air, he drew his arm back and clenched his fist. A thunderous roar erupted across the battlefield. Both the Konohagakure and Kirigakure ninja fighting in the distance heard the violent sound. It was followed by a deep, rumbling pressure that rolled through the forest. Hayashi's movements accelerated. With a final explosive strike, he unleashed a massive compressed shockwave. Daytime Tiger. A gigantic blast of air pressure erupted forward, shaped by overwhelming force. The attack crashed down upon Fuguki with unstoppable momentum. Boom. The surrounding trees were instantly blown apart. The earth was torn open as if plowed by a giant blade, leaving behind a massive crater. At the center of the crater stood Fuguki. He was gripping Samehada tightly with both hands, desperately trying to absorb the chakra within the attack. But the daytime tiger was not chakra. It was pure physical force. The sword could do nothing. Moments later, blood burst from Fuguki's eyes, nose, ears, and mouth. His grip weakened and Samehada slipped from his hands before clattering onto the ground. The giant swordsman collapsed. The battle was over. Hayashi released the 8 gates and exhaled slowly. A wave of exhaustion spread through his body. His muscles ached and fatigue crept into his bones. He had only opened the 5th gate, yet the strain was still heavy. Hayashi could not help wondering how people like Mike Guy and his father endured the 7th gate, or even the terrifying 8th gate. After resting briefly, Hayashi walked toward Fuguki's body. He sealed the corpse inside a storage scroll before turning his attention to Samehada, which was lying on the ground pretending to be lifeless. Hayashi pulled out a kunai and poked the blade. Samehada reacted instantly. The dark blue spikes along its body rose sharply, nearly piercing Hayashi's wrist. A moment later the sword seemed to realize its master was gone. The spikes slowly lowered again. Then the sword's handle extended slightly and gently tapped Hayashi's ankle, almost like a cautious greeting. Hayashi raised an eyebrow. Was this sword really that quick to change loyalty? He clicked his tongue but grabbed the handle anyway, lifting Samehada onto his shoulder. Free equipment was still equipment. At worst he simply would not use it if he ever encountered the 8 Tails Jinchuriki in the future. In that sense, Samehada seemed more loyal to the 8 Tails than to any human master. As he held the weapon, Hayashi felt a steady stream of chakra flow back into his body. The fatigue from the 8 gates slowly faded as the sword fed him energy. The sensation made him pause. This weapon was practically a combination of a chakra absorber, a small-tailed beast, and a medical support ninja all in one. Samehada truly deserved its reputation as the most brutal weapon among ninja tools. Hayashi chuckled softly. In the end, power always came easier when you had the right advantages. After all, the world often favored those who knew how to use them. Milestone. 100 Power Stones equals 1 bonus chapter. 200 Power Stones equals 3 bonus chapters. Also, if you want to read more, there are up to 100 chapters available on Patreon. Patreon.com/Zeph. Chapter 446, 447, The Turning Tide. 1,409 words. As dawn gradually broke over the battlefield, the outcome of the surprise assault on Konohagakure slowly became clear. At the beginning of the attack, Konoha had been caught completely off guard. The enemy forces had even managed to flank several defensive lines, creating chaos across the front. However, as the battle dragged on, the situation began to stabilize. What should have been a decisive strike slowly turned into a stalemate. The main reason was simple. The forces from Kirigakure under the command of Suikazan Fuguki never appeared at the designated position according to their original battle plan. The disappearance of several hundred missed ninja created a massive gap in the strategy. Without that crucial unit, the carefully prepared plan collapsed, and the troops attempting the frontal landing on the beach were left without proper support. Even with this failure, the hidden mist had not completely lost the battle. At worst, it could be considered a minor setback. But everything changed the moment Hayashi entered the battlefield carrying Samehada. The balance of the war began to tilt. Hayashi alone was enough to hold back several elite mist fighters, including Terumi Sora. At the same time, he still had the freedom to eliminate other enemy ninja during the clash. The Konoha forces were stunned. Only then did they truly understand why this 18-year-old Uchiha had been appointed as a frontline commander and granted special privileges by Konoha's Council of Elders. While they were still ordinary shinobi struggling to survive each battle, Hayashi was already commanding the battlefield itself. Retreat. As the sun finally rose over the sea, Terumi Sora forced the word out through blood-stained lips. His voice echoed across the battlefield. The remaining members of the 7 ninja swordsmen, who were present, immediately disengaged. Biwa Jizo, Kurioer Kushimaru, Munashi Jinpachi, and Hozuki Oboro instantly withdrew from their battles and dashed toward the coastline. At the same moment, Nawaki drove his weapon through the heart of Akabino Jinin. After confirming the kill, Nawaki immediately turned his head, searching for another enemy to pursue. However, the long battle had already taken a heavy toll on him. Earlier he had summoned Katsuyu and fought Jinin for an extended period before finally managing to defeat him. His chakra was not completely depleted, but his physical strength was reaching its limit. Even so, Nawaki forced himself forward. The enemy was retreating. This was the perfect chance to chase them down. Not far away, Hayashi Hyuga was in a similar situation. In fact, his condition was even worse. Unlike Nawaki, he did not possess the powerful vitality of the Senju bloodline. Still, Hayashi rushed toward the sea without hesitation. The two men clearly had the same thought. They could not allow the enemy to escape so easily. Hayashi noticed the retreating commander and quickly formed hand seals. Water release, water dragon bullet technique. Several massive water dragons surged forward from the ocean, roaring through the air as they cut off Terumi Sora's escape routes from multiple directions. Seeing the attack closing in, Terumi Sora finally stopped holding back. Lava release, melting apparition technique. A large amount of corrosive liquid erupted from his mouth, spreading outward to form a defensive barrier. Boom. Boom. The water dragon bullets crashed into the molten barrier one after another, but each attack was blocked by the lava-based defense. Using that brief opening, Terumi Sora turned and fled without even looking back. Kill them. The remaining Kirigakure forces were already withdrawing after receiving the command. But the Konoha shinobi had reached their limit. The sight of fallen comrades filled them with fury. Stepping over bodies scattered across the battlefield, they roared and rushed forward in pursuit. The chase continued until the fighting reached the ocean surface, more than 100 meters away from the coastline of the Land of Fire. Standing at the very front, Hayashi raised his hand. Beside him, Himeji immediately prepared a signal flare. Hayashi gave a small nod. The flare shot into the sky. It signaled the end of the pursuit. Chasing the enemy had been necessary, but going too far would only lead them into hidden traps. The hidden mist had placed countless ambushes throughout the surrounding sea. Furthermore, the Konoha ninja were completely exhausted. Most of them were only moving forward through anger and adrenaline. Continuing the pursuit would achieve little. Watching the flare ignite in the distance, Shikaku Nara finally let out a quiet breath of relief. Hayashi was the commander, but he was still young. Shikaku had worried that the Uchiha might push forward recklessly. Fortunately, that fear proved unnecessary. In fact, Hayashi had only been appointed to command this battlefield because of Shikaku's recommendation. For many years, Shikaku had quietly observed the young Uchiha. Hayashi's calm personality was very different from the typical reputation of the Uchiha clan. The Nara clan had never sought the position of Hokage, nor did they intend to compete for it. However, they would always remain the Hokage's most reliable advisors. Maintaining that position required far more than strength. It required political awareness, patience, and the ability to judge people accurately. In that regard, the Nara clan had always been exceptional. From the early days when Hashirama Senju founded Konoha, the Nara, Yamanaka, and Akimichi families had joined together and remained loyal allies. Even after Hiruzen Sarutobi rose to power, the balance remained the same. Through careful observation, Shikaku had already realized something many ninja did not know. Hiruzen Sarutobi was preparing to step down. Once the current war ended, the entire political structure of Konoha might change. Many people believed the legendary Sannin, or the famous Tsukumo Hatake, would become the next Hokage. But Shikaku had a different opinion. He was increasingly optimistic about Hayashi. It was not simply because of Hayashi's strength or his achievements on the battlefield. The truly remarkable thing was the network of connections Hayashi had built over time. Some of those connections were intentional, while others seemed to have formed naturally. His influence extended from senior officials such as Koharu Utatane to multiple key departments including the medical division, the Umbu, the sealing teams, and even the Konoha military police force. Within each of these departments, there were people who trusted him and held real authority. Even among the younger generation, many influential shinobi such as Choza Akimichi had strong relationships with him. It was truly astonishing. From the moment Hayashi stepped onto the battlefield until the battle ended, he had performed flawlessly. In the shortest time possible, he had established the authority expected of a commander. For someone so young, that level of composure was rare. Shikaku could not help but admire him more with every passing day. Far away from the battlefield, several hundred meters into the forest, a strange pitcher plant-like creature silently observed everything. It failed. White Zetsu grinned as it watched the aftermath of the battle. The deaths of the Kirigakure ninja meant nothing to it. If anything, the creature seemed amused. I didn't expect that little girl from the Hyuga clan to summon Konoha's lightning flash. That title really is troublesome, Black Zetsu replied in a low voice. Even from its perspective, Hayashi's talent was extraordinary. Within the history of the Uchiha clan, his potential could easily rank among the very best. Awakening the Mangekyo Sharingan was only a matter of time. It seems we must eliminate him sooner or later, Black Zetsu continued quietly. Otherwise he will interfere with our future plans. White Zetsu glanced toward the distant figure of Hayashi. Killing him won't be easy. Black Zetsu's eyes flickered slightly. Every shinobi has a weakness. He has several. It paused briefly. The girl from the Hyuga clan is one of them. White Zetsu tilted its head. Didn't Fugaku Uchiha say he would deal with Konoha's lightning flash? Black Zetsu let out a quiet snort. Fugaku is no longer a match for him. And once Hayashi awakens the Mangekyo Sharingan, the gap will only grow wider. In Black Zetsu's eyes, Fugaku could never compare to someone like Madara Uchiha. If the plan relied on Fugaku alone, who knew how long it would take to succeed? It seemed another solution would be necessary. Perhaps it was finally time to prepare for Madara's return. "Let's go," Black Zetsu said. "Fugaku is still waiting for our report." As the words faded, the massive pitcher plant slowly sank back into the ground and disappeared. Chapter 447, 448, Aftermath. 1478 words. With the withdrawal of the hidden mist forces, the surprise attack finally came to an end. The Konoha shinobi who marched back across the shoreline looked utterly exhausted. Many moved slowly, their armor stained with blood and seawater. Bodies covered the battlefield, both friend and enemy alike. Some ninja knelt beside fallen comrades, grief written plainly across their faces. Others stared silently at the ground, their expressions empty. War had already claimed too many lives. For most of them, death had become something almost routine. Simply surviving another battle already felt like a blessing. In such a world, few had the strength left to demand anything more. Nawaki, after this battle, will the war with the Land of Water finally end? The question came as Hayashi reunited with his old friend among the returning troops. The enemy commander had fled in defeat. Out of the feared 7 ninja swordsmen of the mist, only 4 were still able to fight. Added to that was Konoha's earlier victory in the Land of Bears. From Hayashi's point of view, the hidden mist village had already suffered heavy losses. Negotiating peace seemed like the logical step. Still walking at the rear of the formation, Hayashi shook his head slightly. "Not even close," he said. "If a single battle could truly end the war and crush Hidden Mist completely, I would chase them to the very last man. I would not let them escape so easily." Hidden Mist had suffered a defeat today, but that did not mean the war was over. Large numbers of Mist shinobi were still stationed near the border of the Land of Hot Springs. Those forces could invade the Land of Fire at any moment, or link up with the Hidden Cloud village to launch a combined offensive. Even deeper inside the Hidden Mist village, many elite shinobi had yet to be deployed. The war had barely reached its middle stage. Under those circumstances, the 4th Mizukage had little reason to seek negotiations. "Even if we cannot force them to agree to peace," Nawaki continued, "we can at least drive them out of the Land of Waves, right? That depends on what we accomplish today." Hayashi narrowed his eyes slightly as he looked toward the horizon. The sun was slowly rising above the ocean, casting pale golden light across the battered battlefield. Cleaning up after a large-scale battle was never easy. Konoha shinobi spent hours identifying the fallen, separating their own comrades from enemy corpses, and recording the casualties. The process was slow and emotionally draining. The preliminary casualty report did not arrive until the afternoon. Hayashi picked up the report and scanned through the numbers. Even though he had already prepared himself mentally, the figures still caused his expression to tighten. Out of nearly 2,000 Konoha shinobi who participated in the battle, more than 500 had died. Many others were severely injured and would not return to combat anytime soon. Compared with Hidden Mist's losses, Konoha had actually suffered fewer casualties. However, the difference in manpower between the villages made every loss painful. Konoha did not have the luxury of wasting shinobi. After reading the summary, Hayashi set the scroll down and continued working. Now that he had officially arrived at the front line, the acting commander Hatake Tsukumo had transferred almost all command authority to him. The handover alone took nearly the entire day. Commanding a frontline force meant dealing with countless responsibilities, troop rotations, supply management, patrol schedules, intelligence reports, and coordination between units. Fortunately, Hayashi had spent years assisting Orochimaru, and had already learned how to handle such tasks. Even so, the burden would have been overwhelming if not for Tsukumo's support. Night had already fallen. Inside the central command tent, Hayashi sat alone with several stacks of documents spread across the table. A lantern flickered beside him as he carefully drafted a detailed report for the third Hokage. What had begun as a sudden ambush had escalated into a large-scale battle. The Hokage needed to know everything that had happened on the front line. Hayashi also needed to include the names of those who had distinguished themselves during the fight. The Hokage required a list of war heroes so that the village could follow proper procedure, official commendations, public recognition, and battlefield promotions. In the past, Orochimaru had usually handled these reports, but Hayashi had assisted enough times to know the routine by heart. The process was simple. Praise them thoroughly. Write about their courage, their decisive actions, their unwavering loyalty to Konoha. Describe their accomplishments in the most impressive way possible. That was the standard format for battlefield commendations. Whether such glowing praise might accidentally bring bad luck to the recipients was another matter entirely. For the people of Konoha, the only message that truly mattered was simple. The front line was winning. Enemy villages were suffering losses, while Konoha continued to stand strong. After finishing that section, Hayashi moved on to the most serious part of the report. The list of the dead. Even though today had ended in victory, war always demanded a price. The village needed an accurate record of those who had fallen so that their families could receive compensation and support. If the earlier sections could afford some exaggeration, this part required absolute precision. A single mistake could affect the lives of surviving family members, especially children who had lost their parents. Hayashi had already assigned that task to Himeji earlier, which was why neither of them had eaten yet. Nawaki. During a brief pause, Hayashi looked up and saw his friend pushing aside the tent flap and stepping inside. Something came to mind, Nawaki said. I thought I should mention it. Go ahead. Hayashi gestured for him to sit down, then asked Himeji to find some food while they talked. When the hidden mist attacked this morning, Nawaki began, Nono and I were out on patrol. Suddenly there was an explosion inside our perimeter. The enemy slipped past the scouts and launched a silent raid. Nono and I both suspect that there might be a spy within headquarters. He had deliberately stayed silent during the earlier Jonin meeting because he feared alerting the potential traitor. Hayashi nodded calmly. Tsukumo already mentioned the same concern to me. He shares your suspicion. But only a small group knows the exact scout assignments, Nawaki said. And none of them should have any connection to Hidden Mist. Could someone have leaked information accidentally? Nawaki asked. Hayashi shook his head. There is no realistic way to investigate that right now. It was not as if he could summon the Hyuga clan and politely ask whether someone had revealed military intelligence. More importantly, Hayashi already had his own theory. If Uchiha Madara truly controlled Hidden Mist from the shadows, then White Zetsu could easily gather intelligence anywhere in the ninja world. Against that kind of surveillance, even the most secure defenses would be meaningless. So we just ignore it? Nawaki asked with clear frustration. Hayashi calmly picked up his teacup, took a sip, and smiled faintly. I already have a solution. At that moment, Himeji returned with a boxed meal in her hands. She placed it in front of Hayashi before quietly stepping aside. Thank you, Hayashi said. Then he glanced at Nawaki. You already ate, right? I did, Nawaki replied slowly. Why? An uneasy feeling suddenly appeared in his mind. Good. Hayashi turned to Himeji. How many names are left to copy? A little over 300. Give 200 of them to Nawaki. Silence filled the tent. I am on patrol tonight, Nawaki protested. Patrol? Hayashi scoffed lightly. You are clearly planning to take Nono out for a date. He continued calmly. Minato is currently assisting Jiraiya-sensei in the Land of Wind. You cannot even help me copy a few names. Nawaki sighed deeply, clearly defeated, and accepted the scroll. While he worked, another thought suddenly crossed his mind. By the way, did you finish my commendation report? Of course, Hayashi replied casually. He recited the contents from memory. Single-handedly held off a dozen Jonin-level opponents. Personally eliminated the swordsman Tosaburo. The battlefield trembled at the sight of Nawaki's strength. Nawaki frowned. That sounds too ordinary. He shook his head. Add some stronger wording. At the very least compare me to the fourth Mizukage. Hayashi stared at him silently. If Nawaki ever died, Hayashi thought privately, it would probably be because of his own bragging. While continuing to copy names, Nawaki suddenly muttered to himself. I should choose a proper title for myself. Water God. No, that was grandfather's title. King of Water Release. That sounds terrible. He looked up. Do you have any suggestions? Hayashi raised an eyebrow. You could call yourself the Sea King. Patreon = Zeph. Unreleased chapters are available there. Chapter 448, 449, The 100 Ninja War Plan. 1,483 words. In April of Konoha Year 38, after Hayashi and Tsukumo led several large-scale offensives, Kirigakure finally reached its limit. Unable to withstand the continued pressure from Konoha's forces, they were forced to withdraw from the Land of Waves. The Land of Waves was a poor and underdeveloped island nation, but its strategic value was extremely important. It was one of the few island territories located along the coastline of the Land of Fire. Because of its location, controlling it meant controlling a key maritime route. Once Konoha secured the Land of Waves, the strategic flexibility of the entire front line improved dramatically. With both the Land of Waves and the Land of Bears acting as forward positions, Konoha could expand its military operations in multiple directions. To the west, they could cut off Kirigakure's influence over the Land of Hot Water. To the east, the islands belonging to the Land of Water would become vulnerable to invasion. In short, the balance of the coastal battlefield had begun to shift. At this moment, several kilometers away from Konoha's newly established base in the Land of Waves, a dense forest stretched across the island. Hayashi stood quietly among the trees, carefully observing his surroundings. After confirming the area, he quickly moved deeper into the forest until he reached the center of the entire woodland. With a powerful leap, he jumped onto the massive crown of a towering ancient tree. Standing on the thick branches, Hayashi stretched out his arms. His index fingers met, forming a triangular hand sign. He then placed both hands firmly against the trunk of the giant tree. Instantly, intricate ceiling patterns spread across the bark like living vines. From the center of the tree, the patterns expanded outward in all directions. Invisible waves of chakra radiated through the forest, forming a massive sensory barrier that resembled a giant inverted bowl covering the entire area. Once the barrier was completed, Hayashi disappeared from the treetop in a flash, moving away at full speed. Over the next 2 days, he repeated this process again and again across the island. By the time he finished, more than a dozen similar barriers had been established throughout the Land of Waves. These were sensory barriers designed to detect the presence of nearby shinobi. The central control point of the entire barrier network was located inside the Konoha base, where 10 members of the sealing team were assigned to monitor the system constantly. If Kirigakure shinobi entered the area, their presence would immediately trigger the detection network. If someone attempted to destroy one of the barriers deliberately, Hayashi himself would also sense the disturbance. Although this system could not completely stop enemy infiltration, it solved the biggest problem Konoha had previously faced. In the past, Kirigakure shinobi had slipped past the defensive line and infiltrated the area without anyone noticing. That would no longer happen so easily. After completing the final barrier, Hayashi returned to the Konoha camp. Inside the command tent, Tsukumo was already holding a meeting with the Jonin. After the 2 divisions of Konoha forces merged together, the number of shinobi stationed on this front line increased once again. Now that the Land of Waves had been secured, the conditions were finally right to launch a new phase of the war. When Hayashi entered the tent, he immediately walked to the empty seat beside Tsukumo and sat down. Most of the shinobi attending the meeting were clan members. Unlike the Second Shinobi World War, this conflict had placed Konoha in a dangerous position. The village was facing pressure from 4 of the 5 great nations simultaneously. Under such circumstances, even the conservative clan elders had no choice but to commit their full strength to the battlefield. The Uchiha clan, who had long served as Konoha's security force, had deployed a significant number of elite shinobi. Even the Hyuga clan had sent many members of their main family to the front line. At the front of the tent, Narashikaku stood beside a massive map of the ninja world. As Konoha's acting strategist for this battlefield, he began explaining the current situation. As everyone already knows, Kirigakure has withdrawn from the Land of Waves, Shikaku said calmly. Their base in the Land of Bears has also been destroyed. Out of the 3 defensive blockade lines they established earlier, only the final line in the Land of Hot Water remains. After more than a year of fighting, Kirigakure had been forced to accept a harsh reality. They could not defeat Konoha in a direct confrontation. Because of this, the 4th Mizukage, Yagura, had made a major strategic adjustment. The Kirigakure forces stationed in the Land of Hot Water were ordered to combine with the Kumogakure army already operating there. Together, the 2 villages would launch a joint assault against Konoha's forces. With the deployment of 2 Jinchuriki, the son of the Raikage, and numerous elite shinobi, the battlefield situation in the Land of Hot Water had become extremely dangerous. Danzo and Hamura's forces were already struggling to hold their ground. There were even rumors that the 3rd Raikage himself was preparing to enter the battlefield. If that happened, the situation would escalate to the point where the 3rd Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, might also be forced to personally intervene. Since the Land of Hot Water battlefield offered such a strong advantage, Kirigakure had no reason to continue confronting Hayashi and Tsukumo directly. Instead, reinforcing their alliance with Kumogakure and focusing on destroying Danzo's forces was the most logical strategy. As for the coastal battlefield of the Land of Fire that Hayashi and Tsukumo controlled, Kirigakure was willing to temporarily abandon it. This decision created enormous pressure for Konoha. Danzo was now facing the combined forces of 2 major villages, including the notoriously powerful Kumogakure. It was no surprise that he had already sent multiple urgent requests for reinforcements to the 3rd Hokage. Hiruzen Sarutobi himself was under tremendous strain. While replying to Danzo and urging him to continue holding the line, he was also mobilizing every available shinobi within the village and sending them to the battlefield. Even Jiraiya, one of the legendary Sannin, had been transferred to the Land of Hot Water. Now only Orochimaru and Tsunade remained to support the Wind Country front. Despite the severity of the situation, the 3rd Hokage still refused to transfer Hayashi and Tsukumo's forces to reinforce Danzo. The reason was simple. Konoha could not allow itself to be dragged around by enemy strategy. Sending reinforcements might temporarily ease the pressure in the Land of Hot Water, but it would not solve the underlying problem. The real solution was far more direct. Konoha needed to attack the Land of Water itself. If Kirigakure was forced to defend their own homeland, they would no longer have the freedom to support Kumogakure's offensive. After Shikaku finished explaining the strategic situation, Tsukumo spoke. His tone was calm, but the meaning of his words was unmistakable. Next, we will begin an active offensive against the Land of Water. Excitement immediately spread through the tent. For shinobi, taking the initiative in battle meant opportunities for achievement and recognition. The more contributions they made during the war, the greater their status and rewards would be within the village. Tsukumo pointed to the map again. During the past weeks, we have investigated the sea routes used by Kirigakure to transport reinforcements to the Land of Hot Water. Our next task is to block these routes. He paused briefly before continuing. Mission scrolls have already been distributed to each team captain. Every squad will be responsible for a specific section of ocean. Your task is to deploy underwater mines and explosive tags within your assigned area. This operation must be completed within 3 days. Understood? Yes. The response from the Jonin echoed throughout the tent. Completing such a large-scale task in only 3 days would be impossible for ordinary soldiers. However, shinobi were far from ordinary. With chakra, water walking techniques, and coordinated teamwork, the mission was difficult but achievable. The primary goal of the operation was to disrupt Kirigakure's naval movement and relieve the pressure on Danzo's forces. At the same time, Konoha units would launch attacks against several coastal supply bases belonging to Kirigakure. According to intelligence reports, those strongholds contained large stockpiles of combat supplies. From a strategic perspective, the plan was simple. Destroy enemy logistics. Cut off their transportation routes. Force them into a defensive position. As the meeting reached its conclusion, Hayashi raised his hand and spoke calmly. The operation needs a code name. He looked around the tent at the gathered shinobi before announcing it. The name of this operation will be the 100 Ninja War. Silence filled the tent for a brief moment as the name settled into everyone's mind. Then the Jonin began quietly discussing the upcoming mission. Chapter 449, 450, Sea of Conflict. 669 words. After the meeting ended, many ninja grumbled about the operation's code name. They were sending over 1,000 ninja, yet it was still called the 100 Ninja War. It seemed Sensei Uchiha Hayashi had died too young. An elder from one of the clans shook his head. Our family alone sent more than 100 ninja, and they still call it the 100 Ninja War. How unambitious. Despite the complaints, the operation had to continue. 2 days later, on the sea lane between the Land of Waves and the Land of Hot Springs, a Konoha Jonin named Fujihara, accompanied by 3 genin under his command, planted sea mines and underwater explosive tags. They worked from small, slow boats. The faster ship they had arrived on was assigned to a team heading to deeper waters. Wartime offered no leisure. Alongside supervising the genin, Jonin had to provide manpower themselves. Sensei Fujihara, will these mines and explosive tags really work? Asked a short-haired boy, surfacing beside the boat. Fujihara, soaked from head to toe, nodded. They will. These contact mines are highly unstable. Once triggered, they set off a chain reaction. Against large vessels, even iron ships, they're lethal. Against ninja, they might not be enough. Not because ninja are stronger, just faster. So they won't actually kill enemy ninja. The genin, new to battle, frowned. To him, eliminating enemy ninja was the true measure of efficiency. That's not the only way to see it, Fujihara said with a small laugh. Let me explain something. Go ahead, sir. The Land of Water is far from here. Besides ninja, what else do hidden mist ships carry? Supplies, weapons, food, the genin answered after a moment. Exactly. We can't be sure their ships will pass through here, but that's what a blockade is. You can't guarantee prey walks into a trap, but if they do, even if we don't defeat the enemy ninja, we can still destroy their cargo. That's a victory of sorts. The black-haired genin nodded thoughtfully. All right, enough talk. It's getting late. Finish up so we can head back. Yes, sir. The genin dove back into the water. Fujihara gazed at the dark sea, the winter chill biting through his clothes. He thought of the battlefield ahead. With Commanders Lord Tsukumo and Lord Hayashi leading us, it should be fine, he muttered. The two were revered among ordinary ninja for their achievements. With them around, the war seemed less terrifying. 3 days of non-stop work by Konoha ninja completed the trap line. Supreme Commander Hayashi arrived at the battlefield, leaving the Land of Waves sector to Shikumo for emergency intel. A number of Konoha ninja remained stationed there as a garrison. Hayashi moved with only a small escort, most forces were spread across the ocean. The real strength lay in the mines and explosive tags lining the defensive sea belt. 2 hours later, Hayashi reached the sector patrolled by Hyuga ninja. How's the situation? He asked Yamashiro, a young Hyuga jonin. No hidden mist ships have entered the recon zone yet. Judging by their speed, they won't reach our area until tonight, Yamashiro said, hesitating. Can we be sure they'll come through here? Nothing is ever certain on a battlefield. If they want to land in the land of hot springs, they must cross this stretch of sea. A detour wastes time and food, and Tsukumo and I are prepared for that. Hayashi showed no concern about hidden mist spies. Even if the enemy knew Konoha planned an ambush, they would still risk sending ships. They could not rely on Kumogakure for supplies. It was like history's great wars, even when convoys were attacked, supply lines had to continue. Without them, victory was impossible. Reassured by Hayashi's presence, the young Hyuga resumed his Byakugan scouting. For 3 days straight, he watched the sea, never resting unless relieved. Some ninja fought not for politics, but out of loyalty to the village itself. "Sir, ship spotted!" Yamashiro exclaimed several days later, excitement in his voice. Patreon _Zeph. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Novels Wonderland.